Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
He often had nightmares. He wakes up in the night in a cold sweat. Something is troubling him. The boy gets out of bed, goes to the stairwell, looks around. No one's there. He walks down the stairs. It's business as usual. And when he gets outside, he sees that there's been an apocalypse. Everything's destroyed. The houses have been turned into piles of bricks. There's no one on the street. There's someone peeking around the corner. With some sixth sense, the boy realizes it's not a person. He jumps out of his seat and runs back into the entryway. But now there are only stairs. There are no walls. The boy screams, and at that moment he wakes up. "Son, what's wrong?" Mom's awake too. It was just a bad dream. He was still sitting on the bed, confused. It seemed like everything he'd just seen was true. "Come on, get to bed for school tomorrow," the woman muttered. "Okay." The boy agreed with her, although he didn't really want to do it. He went back to bed, fell asleep, and the dream seemed to go on. It was scary, but he couldn't wake up. The next day, Christopher got up in the morning, exhausted. He couldn't pull himself together. He really wanted to sleep, but the kid went to school anyway. He knew if he didn't, his parents wouldn't be happy. The family lived in an ordinary town. Christopher had a sister. The birth father was long gone. His mother lived with her new husband, who was the boy's stepmother. "Mom, are we going to take a little longer walk with the boys tonight?" asked the son in the evening. "What's the matter?" The woman looked at him. "Oh," he just shrugged his shoulders. "I don't know what to say. All weekend, please, but not during the week." The woman was stern. "All right, we all don't like these lectures." He went out to the yard, told his friends that it wasn't going to work out today. They were meeting at one of the houses in their neighborhood. The young people there had taken over the basement. Now, when they studied already in the 8th grade, they couldn't smoke and drink beer. But back then, they had to walk around a lot longer to get the air out. "Then we'll sit here," showed Stephen to a bench in the yard. Great. No one argued with him. Why go anywhere when everyone lives nearby? There was no ringleader in the group. Everyone was on an equal footing. It was the 90s, so young people did what they could. "We'd go out on the weekend," the man would say. Of course, it was a favorite. If we were lucky, guys from another neighborhood would come over. We could wave. Stephen said, "Yeah, we'd have to get ready." Christopher remembered the last time the opponents had brass knuckles. All they could come up with was a rock for insulation. "Don't teach a scientist," his comrade told him. In those years, young people did not think of anything else. There was practically nowhere to go. All the circles ended in the afternoon, and in the evening the boys were left to themselves. They gathered together, discussed a plan of action, took money somewhere, bought cheap alcohol, drank it at construction sites or abandoned. "Hey, Christopher." One day, an older comrade came up to the guy. "Hi." Looked at him. It was Rick. He graduated 2 years ago, and now he was looking for intrepid youngsters. "Come on, let's step back. We need to talk." He knew Christopher was not a shy guy and could do a lot of things. Christopher looked back at his friends and followed his older comrade. Of course, it was a little scary because he knew what Rick was doing, but it was embarrassing in front of his friends if he didn't go. The young men rounded the corner of the building, and Rick looked around and handed Christopher 2 matchboxes. "What are these?" The boy did not understand then. "You don't know?" Rick winked at him. "I guess," Christopher told him. "Well, if you guess, you probably know what to do with it," smirked the older man. Roughly, Christopher quickly stashed what he had just been handed in his pocket. "You hand it over, you'll get some good money." There was a piece of paper that said who to hand it all over to. Okay, the boy walked back towards the school. He didn't look back at Rick. At first it was very scary, because Christopher was afraid that someone would see or find out what he was doing. But once, twice, 3 times, and then he felt at ease, because not only did he have good money, but he also hung around in circles with the older guys. Knew if anybody took offense, you could just tell them, and they'd stand up for him. "Christopher, are you coming or not?" Stephen called out to him, but he had to wait for the bell to ring and hand over what was in his pocket. "Wait a minute," the young man waved him away. "Listen, tell me, why have you been so different lately?" A friend came up to him. "Let me tell you everything later. It's just not the right time." The guy didn't want to share information with anyone because he was afraid that everything would come out. Over the weekend, they met up with Rick again. He handed him some matchbooks. "There's more than enough here. Christopher looked at the one I won't be in for a while. So if they ask, you can sell it," said Rick to him. "I hear you." They parted ways. Christopher came home. There were 2 boxes in his pocket. They were straight up igniting his pants all the way through. The boy knew that if his mother found these in his pants, nothing good would come of it. In the evening, he went for a walk. He met Stephen in the yard. "Listen, friend, I have something very important to tell you." Christopher came up to him. "Go ahead." A friend was always willing to listen. "Do you remember Rick, who approached me at school?" he asked him. "Of course I remember," smiled Stephen. So Christopher began to tell him what was going on. "Do you want something from me?" Stephen stood. He was in complete shock. He had no idea that there was such a thing going on at the school. "Here, you can hide this at your house or something." He took the boxes out of his pocket. Wow, he opened one of them. "Close it, or you'll wake up." He kept looking around. He was afraid that someone might see them. "Listen, why don't we try it?" Stephen smiled. "I don't even know." "Then we'd have to invest the money," the guy shrugged. "All right, let's lay down. It's not that expensive," said his friend. That afternoon, a group of guys gathered in their den. In theory, they knew how it was done, so it wasn't anything complicated. Christopher took a drag. He didn't feel anything like that. It even felt to him like normal cigarettes. Afterward, when the boys went home, they felt a little dizzy. And no matter what anyone says now, it seemed ridiculous. The boy came home, saying something, giggling. The mother suspected something wrong. She began to question her son, but he remained silent, said nothing. Then the next day, the woman called a policeman she knew and shared her suspicions with him. He offered to hold a preventive conversation on the topic that was worrying all parents now. But he also said that the mother should not warn anyone. Let the son not know, he would think it was a stranger to no one. And so it was agreed. In the evening, when Christopher came home, they had a policeman sitting in the kitchen. "Hello." I looked at him, and his knees were shaking. He now thought he had done the right thing when he gave Stephen the box. Passing Christopher, "I am waiting for you," the man told him. Christopher walked into the kitchen, sat down across from him. He didn't look up. He was really scared that he was about to start talking, and his mom and everyone else would find out what he was doing. "So, young man from the school has received a signal that you are doing the wrong things, and you need to have a preventive conversation with you. So here I am," said the man. Was he writing something in his notebook? "I didn't do anything like that," Christopher began to mumble. But then I thought, the more you get lost, the more they'll think of you. So he shut up. "I'm not accusing you of anything yet." The man in uniform smirked. "Then why did you come?" The boy didn't understand. The mother stood near him and saw that her son was not comfortable. "I told you, it's a preventive conversation. Everyone knows that there are a lot of illegal substances now. They are distributed among school children and other residents of our city. I just want you to know that if you suddenly get into a company where they do it, or even worse, start using or distributing, then nothing good awaits you in the future," said the policeman. I understood. Christopher shook his head. He really understood that it was very dangerous, and if he kept doing it, someone would find out or he would get caught. 2 days later, when they met Rick, we all told him so. And no amount of money, no amount of persuasion could make him keep doing it now. The boy wanted to finish 9 grades and leave school. But in the past, all parents were in favor of their child necessarily completing a full school course, that is, 11 grades, and then go to good educational institutions. No, my dear, you study all the years, you will get a certificate. And when you turn 18, then, please, decide everything for yourself and do what you want, his mother told him. But why waste 2 years? Christopher didn't understand. I think you will waste them that way if you even leave school. The mother was worried about her son. Now that Christopher had his own opinions, he often argued with his mother because their views were very different from each other. The young man was fascinated by computer technology. He was constantly collecting, disassembling, looking at how everything is organized, trying to do something new. When he was in his senior year of high school, he already realized that he could assemble and disassemble a computer, as well as fix it. So maybe that's what you'll do with your life, his mother told him. I haven't decided yet, he answered her. It's just that I see you're good at it. She stood and watched her son at the table as he deftly went through the parts and put one to the other. Yes, okay, I'll think about it, he promised his mother. He only had one friend left at school now. That was Stephen. Almost everyone from the yard had moved away. They'd gone to school. They talked lightly about the future, how and what would happen. Now we'll finish school and they'll take us to the army, Christopher said. So he served normally. We'll come back, then we'll start working, said Stephen. That's what they decided. After that, they started to think of something to do. There were a lot of ideas, but it was all wrong. They needed money for one thing and money to start another. They also needed equipment to buy. Then the guys threw some plans on a sheet of paper and decided to think about it later. And suddenly something would change, and they would have a down payment for their startup. And now it was time for exams, which were easily passed because the guys never had any problems with their studies. Only graduation was ahead. On this festive day, the mother was very worried. The suit was the dinner. She had the dress ready. And here her son is standing at the graduation. He is given a certificate. Now the school principal says farewell words that they are releasing the guys into free sailing, almost right before graduation. Christopher turned 18, so it was not far off to receive a summons to the military enlistment office. And it came. Now the guy had to pass a medical examination and then go to the army. At least they would send him somewhere not far away, said the mother, who was upset for the child. Don't worry as if I'm still a kid, Christopher told her. And you will always be little to me. His mother hugged him. Even though he didn't like all that tenderness, he didn't push her away. The day came when the guy was sent off to the army. Some acquaintances and friends gathered, and the next day he was on his way to the station. Son, right, his mother said to him and cried. I will, he told her, smiled, and entered the car. Christopher was not at all worried. It was not the first time he had encountered difficulties. He even wanted to know what would happen next, where he would arrive, who would meet him, and how things would be. Everything went well, just as the mother wanted. The son was sent not so far from home. When the oath was administered, she just took the 4:00 bus, and she was already at the location where Christopher was serving. Yes, at first it was difficult for the boy. He had to get into a new team. Everyone has their own habits, their own opinions. And of course, arguments with the old employees. Nobody canceled that. After 6 months of service, everything was normal. Christopher continued to serve. It was already time for demobilization. He missed home very much. When he went there, he was even worried. He went to a flower store, bought a bouquet for his mom. Hello, dear. A woman hugged him at the entrance. Mom, I'm so tired and I miss you. I want something homemade. He told her. Sure enough. Now off she went to the kitchen. That day and the next few were wonderful. I liked everything here. He remembered a lot of things, looking out the window. They used to run with their friends in this yard. And another mom, do you know where Stephen is now? He asked the woman after a week at home. How would I know? I don't keep track of him. Did she look at him? What so aggressively? Didn't understand the woman's mood. Nothing. She went to the kitchen. In fact, the woman had already gone to work for a day and thought that the son does nothing, but just sits at home. And yet the young man followed her into the kitchen. Christopher, you've been sitting at home for over a week now. Why don't you get a job somewhere? And she looked at him seriously. What are you starting? Get a job when you need one. He shook his head, realizing that everything was starting over. And when that time would come, she wondered. Mom, don't start. He went back to the room. They were not interested. The young man didn't want to work in a factory or for some uncle. He had a lot of ideas. He wanted to do his own thing. It was necessary to find Stephen because Christopher was sure that the two of them could do a lot of things together. The next day, the young man got ready. He decided to go to Stephen, and if he couldn't find him, at least ask his parents where he was. Hello. He arrived at his friend's house. Oh, Christopher, hello. Stephen's mom hugged him. Where's my best friend? He asked her. And he went to the village to help his grandmother, said the landlady. And when will he be home? He asked. I don't even know. And you go to his place, you'll have a rest there. His mother dictated the address where his grandmother lived. Thank you. Christopher didn't mind seeing his friend. He went straight from here to the train station. He didn't bother to warn his mother. An adult already does what he wants. The trip only took about an hour. Then it was a few minutes' walk to the right house, and here the boy is already knocking on the window. He saw his friend, who pulled back the curtains, looked, and as if he could not believe that a friend had come to see him. What are you looking at? Open up. Christopher laughed. No way. Then Stephen shouted and disappeared through the window. A few seconds later, the gate opened, and a guy came out. Didn't you recognize me? Christopher asked his comrade. They hugged each other. How can you recognize how long we have not seen each other? The young man was happy. Invite me into the house, asked Christopher. Sure, let's go. Grandma just baked pies. They went into the yard and then into the house. They sat down at the table. The woman poured them tea, put in the center huge dishes with pies, wished them a pleasant appetite, and went behind a curtain into another room. Well, how's it going? Tell me. Christopher took a bite of the cake. Everything's fine. I'm waiting for you. Lots of plans. Stephen smiled. Well, here I am. Christopher spread his arms out. All right, let's get started. We just need to think about housing. With my parents do not want to live like that, complained Comrade. Great, and I wanted to talk to you about it. Christopher rejoiced. After all, two to rent a place is easier than one. Ugh, and I thought I could not afford it. Stephen exhaled. No, everything will be fine, assured his friend. That was the deal. The friends decided to spend a few days here in the village and then go to the city and start doing something. I'm so glad we haven't lost touch, Christopher said as they drove back to the city. It's okay. Stephen shook his head. He remembered from his childhood what an inventor and initiator Christopher was. I hope so. The boy agreed with him. Christopher arrived home. He thought his mother was going to throw herself at him and start asking him where he had been, why he hadn't warned her. But nothing of the sort happened. Did you go for a walk? Was all she asked when the young man entered the apartment. He didn't say anything. He went into the room, took out a sports bag, and started packing. That's a long way to go. Mom walked in the same way. We're from Stephen and decided to rent an apartment, he told her. Great. As if the woman was even happy. She went back into the kitchen. But all the while he was standing in the hallway, thinking that his mom would at least come out to him. Come on, shouted the one from the kitchen. He went to a friend, who had to ask an acquaintance who rented the apartment whether it is still there or already rented. Zdorova. Well, he asked Stephen. Everything is fine. The apartment is not yet rented, so you can move in right now, said the friend Christopher. Great. He smiled. They took some of Stephen's things and went to the place where they were going to live. After that, the friends sat down at the table to talk about what they wanted to do now. The guys came up with a very good idea with discs and audio cassettes. They were now calculating what they would need. Knowing that my uncle has a basement space, I don't think he needs it. We'll have to ask, Stephen said. If this works out, we'll have very little cost, said Christopher to a friend. And it did work out for the boys. The uncle gave them this little space in the basement. They bought, copied equipment, discs, paper. Everything was gonna work out, everything. And somewhere he took an old computer. He said he gave it to them cheap, but with God. They opened up and began to place ads wherever they could. On the third day, they got a very large order. Guys, hello. A respectable man came to them. Hello. The guys didn't expect this. They thought it would be a one-off. But to do it all at once, I don't know if your work is good or bad, but I have a very urgent order. The customer looked at the surprised guys. Are you talking? Christopher was the first to speak. I have several 1,000 discs. They all need to be processed in 3 days. He said that a few 1,000. Christopher grinned and looked at the equipment they had. I'll give you an advance payment. Anything you say. Just do it, please, the man asked. It was obvious that the matter was urgent. Okay, just let's discuss some points. He looked at his friend Christopher, who was still silent. That's it. What do you say? The customer was in agreement. After that, Christopher explained to him what and how. Good, and here is the money he took out of his pocket. A solid sum put on the table. Bring the discs and see you in 3 days. Christopher said goodbye to him. Have you been making noise for 3 days? Stephen jumped on him. What's the big deal? He didn't understand. You can't do it in a week, especially with our equipment. The comrade almost cried. Calm down. He left us so much money for them. We'll buy a normal machine. Spoke Christopher with knowledge. And if we fail? Stephen did not believe in his own strength. It'll be okay. We'll get through this, Christopher promised him. I don't know. The friend doubted. From that moment on, they began to work hard. They decided to work both day and night. At first, one would go out, the other would sleep, then they would switch. On the third day, they really had everything ready. The customer arrived. He was afraid that it would turn out like with the past performers. He had already given this order to others, but as time passed, when he arrived, he was simply told they couldn't do the job. Guys. He walked in without a greeting and looked at those who worked in this basement. Yes, hello. Come on in. Stephen was cheerful today because he realized that they had done a very difficult job. Did you make it in time? The man looked at them. Of course we did. I promised. Christopher stood up and pointed to the boxes that stood in the corner. First, the customer looked at everything, hummed, shook his head, and paid the rest of the money to the guys. And plus, he added a thank you for the speed. Bye. We'll definitely come to you again. He winked at the guys and called the workers to take the boxes away. Wow. Stephen looked at the money. There was enough here to pay several months' rent. And there was still a decent chunk left over. Well, let's get on with it. I held out my hand to him. Sure, laughed his friend and partner. Today the guys decided to relax a little, go to a cafe and celebrate the completion of a successful deal. Beer? Asked the bartender when they walked in. Thank you, nodded the guys and went to the table. Both of them were in high spirits. They sat and discussed further plans. Toward evening, more people started coming to the cafe. Soon there was not a single free seat left. At that moment, 2 girls entered the hall. They looked around since there were no seats, approached the bar. Wait, Stephen stopped them. He looked at the girls. He thought of something. It became interesting, who now he got up from the table and went to the bar. There he talked to the girls about something. They laughed, and then he and the guy came back to their table. Hi. They looked at Stephen. One took a seat next to the topic, and the other sat down with Stephen. Saw that there was no seat available for them. So that's why he offered to join us, the guy explained to his friend. I see. Until then, Stephen could not understand how it had happened so quickly. Introductions. I'm Sophia, and this is my girlfriend Camille, said one of the girls. Nice to meet you. You already know me. And this is my friend Stephen. Introduced him Christopher. Well, maybe we'll have a beer too. The girls looked at each other. Sure, we're having a party tonight. The friends told them about their deal. Wow, you could tell they were interested. After that, they went for a walk around the city, and when they said goodbye, the guys invited the girls to visit. They'd promised to come the very next day in the rented apartment of the guys. There were 4 people sitting in the kitchen. How about a game of cards and a couple on a couple? Stephen asked. Why not? I'm with Camille, said Christopher, and winked at her. I agree. The girl smiled back and blushed. She liked the guy. Back then at the cafe, they were dealt the cards and the game began. Guys and girls were laughing, saying something. It was clear that Stephen and Sophia also liked him. In the evening, the friends separated. Each went to see the girl home. When they came home, they shared their impressions. The next day after work, the company gathered again. It went on like this every night. Girls, why are we all going back and forth with you? Move in with us, said Stephen after 2 months of acquaintance. What if you don't mind? Camille was looking at Christopher. So Stephen and Sophia started living in one room, and Christopher and Camille in the other. At first, everything was very good, friends working together, girlfriends studying together, and doing everything at home together. But after 2 years of living together, the girls started telling their boyfriends to move out. Everyone wanted something different. We're gonna live like this for a long time. We need to start a family, Camille told Christopher in the room. You realize it's going to be a strain on our budget. Her boyfriend convinced her otherwise. I can't do that. Sophia doesn't want to either. The girl took offense. The guys went on about their business. But as time goes on, things change. And what they were doing was no longer in demand. Now orders were coming in, but they were many times less. Accordingly, the income from it was small. Once I got a call from a friend who lived in another city. It was not far away, and it was many times smaller than where the guys lived and worked now. Hi. Christopher greeted him. Listen, I decided to call you because I know you're good at this. Started telling John why he was calling. But he didn't understand anything yet. Christopher decided to open a repair shop here. Computers, cell phones, other appliances. You're good at that. Spoken with enthusiasm, friend. So do I. What do you want? I'm starting to get a little more up to speed. Christopher. Come, we'll work together. We don't have anything like this yet, and people break things all the time. There was so much enthusiasm in the young man's voice, I'd have to think about it. Christopher asked for some time. Yes, of course. I can't stand you, agreed the friend. After this conversation, the guy thought about it. Yes, it was a great option to make money, but it was necessary to leave here in a small town. What to do? He didn't know. Camille, I need to talk to you, he said to the girl. Go ahead. She looked at him. Remember you said we should separate. I want to offer you an option. He told her everything that his friend had suggested to him, that he go to some backwater. She cringed. There you can rent an apartment cheaper, and the income will be decent. He persuaded the girl. I don't know. I don't want to. She almost stomped her feet. Well, think about it. I'll probably definitely go. He went to Stephen to tell him the same thing. His friend didn't support him either. He said that if he wanted to go, he could leave and he could stay here. Christopher didn't realize that he was the only one in his head thinking that everything would work out, and what difference did it make what city to live in. 2 weeks later, he called John, said that he had decided everything and would soon come to look for an apartment for him. The friend was happy, agreed, and said he was looking forward to it. Christopher, I'm pregnant. In the evening, Camille surprised him. I'm glad. He smiled. What to do now? I wasn't going to go anywhere. She was almost crying. Why didn't you say so before? I thought we were together. He sat down in front of her. I don't. She shrugged her shoulders. Are you going to go? He looked her in the eyes. What to say now? She couldn't accept the thought. Stephen regretted that he would have to part with his friend, but the latter had already decided everything. They saw their friends off to the train station, but all for now. Come and visit, Christopher said and shook his friend's hand. The girls said goodbye too. John, as promised, rented them an apartment, so now the couple had already arrived there. They settled in quickly. Christopher and John started working, just as the friend had said they would. There were tons of people. Everyone had something broken, and they were carrying the workshop to them. The money was very good. Camille stayed home. She was getting ready to be a mother. What's there to do in this little town? Not even anywhere to go. The girl was always teaching. Nothing. Now you will give birth. Then we will find something to do, Christopher reassured her. He took care of Camille as best he could, bought what she asked for. He did almost everything himself. When the due date came, the girl went to the hospital. There were no problems. The labor went perfectly. 5 days later, the happy father met them at the hospital. Why don't you propose to me? Camille asked him one night. Why do you feel so bad? He looked at her in surprise. We have a child. It's time to become a family, she replied. No, I don't want to. Why do I need an extra stamp in my passport? He answered her easily. Then you don't love me. She folded her arms across her chest and turned away from him. Please don't start. He didn't like all these concerts. Right now, Camille was at home with the baby. Christopher was working. The daughter was already 5 years old when Camille started talking about the wedding again. Why are you bothering me with this proposal? The young man was annoyed. I want a wedding, she told him. I don't. He was getting even more annoyed. Then I'm going to leave. She gave him a wait and see look. What do you expect? That I'll talk you out of it or run out to buy a ring, he grinned. They'd been fighting a lot lately. Camille had been the one to stir it up. And now that she said she was leaving, Christopher didn't mind. That's it, I'm going to my mom's and you won't see the baby. She turned and walked away. What makes you think that? Was surprised by the young man. He realized that the girl was trying to hurt him. And what have you done for her? Camille stopped, realizing what had hurt him. Did you, Christopher, have a right to ask that question? From the moment she was born, he had sat by Evelyn's crib almost every night, putting her to bed. Then, when her teeth started teething, he rocked her in his arms. Then he took the girl to kindergarten, practiced, taught her to read, count, write. Camille at this time not only did not work anywhere, but she disappeared all day at the girlfriend's, which she had here appeared, or at the beauty parlor. All of this is my last word. She went into the bathroom and slammed the door. Christopher went to his daughter's room. He just wanted to talk to her. Of course, if there had been no Evelyn, this breakup would not have been so painful. Now the father walked over to Evelyn, beckoned her over and hugged her. Daddy, what's wrong? Why are you so sad? She asked him. Your mom and I had a fight and now she wants to take you away to Grandma's house. Don't worry, sometimes that happens between adults, but you and I will always be in touch. He pulled her even tighter against him. Good. The girl cried. She felt sorry for her daddy and mommy. The very next day, Camille with her belongings and daughter left. Christopher was at work at that moment. In the evening, when he came back and found no one, he felt very bad. He went down to the yard, went to the store, got himself a beer. Now he sat in the kitchen, poured the amber liquid into a glass and drank. There was nothing to be sad about except his daughter. He drank, felt very tired, got up and went to bed. No one was bothering him today. There was no need to go anywhere, to do anything. So he just closed his eyes and fell asleep. The young man began to live alone. It might have seemed difficult at first. You had to cook, go to work, clean. But soon he got used to it. Now he had a lot of free time. He began to work not only in the workshop, but also at home. "Hi," John greeted him at work. "How are you?" Christopher asked him. "I'm fine. Come and visit tonight." It was Saturday. John and his wife were going to stoke the bathhouse. The guy had long dreamed of a private house and had finished building it about 6 months ago. John was most proud of his bathhouse. It turned out to be big. That's where they gathered. Of course, there is nothing to do at home anyway. And you want to talk to someone. Christopher agreed. They had worked today and decided that they would go straight from here to the store and go to John. "What are we drinking?" The friend looked at Christopher. "Beer, what else do you drink in a bathhouse?" He was already putting glass bottles in the basket. "Great." The man agreed with him. They arrived while John's wife was cooking something in the house. The young men flooded the bathhouse, brought water and firewood, and decided that they would also make a kebab. Well, here came the treat. A girl came to the bathhouse. "Thank you, my dear." John sat his wife on his knee. "Now Jenna will also come," said the girl. "Good." Christopher winked at his host. It had been about 6 months since Camille had broken up with him, but Christopher didn't want to meet or date anyone yet. "Aha," he replied. Jenna burst in like a hurricane. She started talking from the door, laughing. "Let's get to know each other." "This is my friend Christopher," said to her John. "Hi." She smiled at him. Christopher did not like such animals, and the girl was not to his taste. All evening they talked. He even walked her home. But he couldn't say he wanted to keep talking to her. "Hi." He saw her the next day. A message from Jenna on social media writing. He told John at the time. "What is writing and who is interested in that one?" Jenna emotionally said the young man. "So answer," suggested his friend. "I don't want to." Christopher waved his head. "Okay, it's up to you." Did not pry into the affairs of a friend, John. The next day, when Christopher was going to work, he again received the same message as yesterday from the girl. And again, he didn't react to it. And again, he didn't react to it. "How's it going?" a friend at work asked. "Nothing new." He shrugged. An hour later, Jenna came to their workshop. John had gone somewhere else, so as much as Christopher didn't want to, he had to approach the girl. "You can look at my phone." She handed him the device in her hand. Now he spun it around, pressed some buttons, realized she'd made up a reason to come over. It was just the sound. He gave her the phone back. "Thank you. How much do I owe you?" Jenna tried to make conversation. Not at all. The guy realized he hadn't done anything at all. "Why don't you want to communicate with me?" she asked directly. "Who told you that?" He wasn't looking at her, minding his own business, and I could see she wasn't going to leave. "Oh, Jenna, hi." John's back. "Hi. Come visit tonight." She called them over to John. "Okay, what's the holiday?" asked the young man. "Nothing. We'll just sit around." She smiled. "It's Monday," said Christopher with a chuckle. "So?" The girl didn't understand. "Let's wait until the weekend then." Then said John. "Okay." She looked at Christopher one more time and went to your place. "She did." The guy guessed. "Yes, she did," Christopher said grudgingly. "What's wrong with her?" "She's a nice girl." His friend didn't understand. "That's it. I don't want to talk about it." Christopher got up and went to the store to buy something to eat. Okay, John stayed out of his way. Jenna kept up with him. She texted Christopher every day to say hello. They met when they went to John's house to visit. So far, Christopher hadn't paid any attention to her. One day, the girl went to the store, and on her way back, she saw Christopher. I yelled hi. He came up to her. Hi. Help me carry the bag, she asked him. Come on, he agreed out of politeness. When they reached the girl's house, she thanked the guy. Why don't you come over for a visit? She asked him. No, was the unequivocal answer. Let's go and talk, drink tea. What, are you going to run away from me like this? She called out to him. Good. He himself at that moment does not know how he agreed, and why he went. Jenna inwardly rejoiced. He's definitely not going anywhere now. Today they had tea and talked. Tomorrow come over after work for dinner. She invited him when she went out to see him off. Well, we'll see. He put on his sneakers, said goodbye, and left. At work, he didn't say anything to John in the morning and went home in the evening. Are you coming over? Jenna texted him. I'm sorry, but I can't make it tonight. Christopher texted her back. I've been working so hard, cooking, it's all for nothing. Even in the message, it was obvious that she was offended. Okay, I'll be there soon. Christopher thought to himself that in addition to having a delicious meal, he would also spend the evening with an interesting person. Yesterday, when they talked, he realized that Jenna was a smart girl, knew a lot of things, and he liked that. Again, they sat in the girls' kitchen and talked. Would you like some wine? She asked him. No beer, he asked in reply. I'll look in a moment. She opened the refrigerator. No, only champagne and wine. She looked at the young man. Okay, let's have wine. He agreed. We can go to the store, Jenna suggested. Would you go with me? Asked her boyfriend. She didn't care what she did, as long as she was near him. Then let's go. They went to the hallway, put on their shoes, and left the apartment. Not half an hour later, the young people were sitting in the room on the couch in front of the TV and drinking beer. Jenna was telling something, and they were laughing. At some point, their faces were so close that the girl couldn't stand it. Let's kiss, she told him. Christopher did not answer anything. He put his arms around the girl, and their lips merged in a kiss. An hour and 2 hours passed, and they kept kissing and kissing. Are you a good kisser? Christopher said to her then. Are you too? She lowered her eyes. Stay. No, not tonight. He looked at his watch and started to get ready to go home. Okay, will you come tomorrow? She asked, but she wasn't hoping for anything. Yes, he nodded. When Christopher walked out of the apartment, Jenna leaned with her back against the door and lit the sea. It was the first time a girl had ever pursued a young man on her own, and she had succeeded. The next day, she got ready, cooked dinner, bought beer, wine. Who knows what he'd want? And the young man came, as promised. Hi. Jenna was very shy. She couldn't even approach him. You've been waiting. He realized by the aroma coming from the kitchen. Yep, she nodded. Tonight went the same way as yesterday. Why don't you stay in tonight? Jenna asked him. You know, you and I have just started hanging out. Let's hang out for a while, smiled Christopher. Okay, agreed the girl, because she didn't want to spoil the already very fragile relationship. The next day, Christopher wrote that he would not be able to come. Jenna tried to ask why, but he never explained anything. By the weekend, she texted that she was going to visit John. To everyone, he told them that he was invited too. They met again and went home together in the evening. And tonight he didn't even have to be persuaded. He stayed with the girl. Of course, they slept in separate rooms, and when Jenna woke up in the morning, she didn't know whether to approach him or not. What to do? Embarrassed, like she was 13 years old, the girl went to the kitchen, made coffee, then she made breakfast. When it was ready, she put it on the coffee table and went to wake up the young man. Hi, everybody. She sat down on the couch where he was sleeping. Good morning. How long has he been wiping his eyes? You should be off to work by now. Jenna knew that guys worked without a day off, so she woke him up. Yeah, I'm getting up now, he said. I made you breakfast. Jenna blushed for some reason. Embarrassed. Thank you. I'll go to the kitchen now. Christopher got up from the couch. He walked down the hall, and Jenna noticed that he was somehow skidding to the right side. He washed his face, had breakfast, told Jenna he would stop by again after work and left. She was happy about it. She couldn't believe that they were actually starting a relationship. The girl got everything ready again. She had the day off today, so there was plenty of time. She waited for Christopher and wondered what they would do tonight. Let's go to the movies. She met him on the doorstep of her apartment. Well, If you want to have dinner, we'll go, he agreed. And they all did. And after they returned from the theater, sat for a while, shared their impressions of the film, and then went to bed again. For a whole week, Christopher went to Jenna's, stayed with her, but they slept in separate rooms. "Why don't you come to bed with me?" the girl asked him one night. "I don't know. Are you going to name it?" "You don't lie down," he answered. "But I'm calling it tonight," she said, and her cheeks flared again. Good. They were now sitting in the kitchen, and as Christopher got up and walked down the hall, Jenna noticed again that he was skidding to the right. At first, the girl paid no attention to it and didn't say anything to him. But about a month after they started living together, Christopher admitted that his right ear really hurts. Sometimes he even feels like he can't hear it. "Why don't you go to the doctor?" Jenna asked him. "Do you know these doctors? They don't say anything, but they give you prescriptions, and nothing really helps." He waved her off. "Well, at least let them do an exam. Figure out why it's happening," she told him. "No, I'm definitely not going to the doctors," the young man replied. "All right. As you wish," she shrugged. But when after another short time Christopher came home, he told Jenna a terrible story. At work, he wanted to listen to music, but since their workshop was not alone, he put on headphones, and when the music started, Christopher could hear with his left ear, but not with his right. The guy thought it was the headphones, so he took them off, switched them around. But they turned out to be fine. So he plugged his left ear and asked John to say something to him. The young man could see from his lips that his friend was talking, but he couldn't hear what he was saying. "Christopher, how could you? I told you to see a doctor." Jenna was afraid for his health. She called the pay clinic they had in town and wanted to make an appointment to see Laura. But when the receptionist listened to her complaints, she said that it is necessary not to see a lawyer, but a neurologist. "Well, then write me down to a neurologist." She dictated Christopher's first and last name and phone number. When he came home from work in the evening, the girl announced to him that he was not going anywhere tomorrow, but was going to a doctor's appointment. She had already made an appointment for him, and he would be expected there. "Why did you do that? Are you sure I need this?" he said to her then. She answered confidently, and she didn't want any more talk. The next day, Christopher went to the doctor. Jenna was waiting for him at home, worried. He dialed her number and told her that the neurologist had sent him for an MRI, saying that he was 90% sure he had a tumor in his head. Of course, this news really scared the girl. While Christopher was getting home, she called the clinic and made an appointment for an MRI. Naturally, the doctor's words really scared the young man. He agreed to undergo all the procedures after everything was done and the report was received. Christopher and Jenna sat in her kitchen, and both were in shock. The MRI showed that Christopher really had a tumor in his head and urgently needed surgery, since the young man's residence registration was in the city where he was born and lived. They went to the hospital there and checked in. The doctor said that the operation could be done under a quota free of charge. Christopher began to take tests, and 3 days before the operation he went to the hospital. Jenna went home. She took all the phone numbers she needed to find out how the surgery went. All day long, Jenna and Christopher talked on the phone. He would tell her what he was doing, how he was being prepped, what tests he was taking, and everything else. The girl couldn't be home alone, so she went to a close friend of hers. "Don't you want to go to a fortune teller?" she asked her. "Why?" "I don't understand, Jenna. Just maybe she could tell you something." The friend saw how worried the girl was and how you wanted to help her, calm her down. "Do you know anyone?" the girl asked her. "Yes, I do." I nodded my head. "Well, okay, come on," agreed Jenna. They arrived at the woman's house. She asked for a picture and started talking. Jenna listened to her and realized it was all true. But at some point, the woman looked up at her and said that Christopher would die during the operation. That was something the girl couldn't accept. She snatched the picture from her and just walked out of the apartment. Ran home. The girlfriend saw all this, followed her. But Jenna didn't want to see anyone right now. She needed to be alone. The day of the surgery, she was on pins and needles. She wouldn't let go of her cell phone. She was pacing from corner to corner, and she didn't know what was going on. And when 800 hours passed, she knew she was going to be out of surgery. By that time, she started calling all the phones, but some were busy, some did not pick up. One number kept getting disconnected. Jenna could not find a place and realized that now it was too late. She could not go there. All night, Jenna did not sleep. Then in the morning, when it was very early, her phone rang. She saw that it was the number of the surgeon who had done Christopher's operation. "Hello," she answered. "Hello, Jenna," he said to her. Yes, she wished he would tell her something faster. "Please come over. I need to talk to you," he replied. "Tell me what's wrong with Christopher." That was the only question she cared about at that moment. "Please come. I'll tell you everything." He sounded like he was pitying her or something. "Can you at least tell me what condition he's in?" She was already crying. "I don't have time for this. When you get here, I'll tell you everything and show you." He hung up. Jenna started looking at the bus schedule. She was packing very fast. She still had 2 hours to go. On the bus, she looked out the window and was afraid that now she was not following a living person. The fortune teller's words that he should die on the operating table came to mind. And somehow it all matched up. The girl arrived at the hospital. She went in to see the surgeon. He was sitting at the table, and he wouldn't look at her. So we told him before the surgery that the facial nerve might be affected. And it was. He also stopped talking. Jenna stood around the table. She knew she was going to pass out. "Doctor." "Well, speak up. Don't be silent anymore." She couldn't take it. During the 8-hour surgery, he had a stroke on the 5th hour. We had to do a second operation. His heart stopped. "Everything is fine now, but your young man is paralyzed on his right side," the surgeon said. "Where is he? Can I see him? What is his condition?" Jenna began to fumble and realized at some point that that was it. Now and then she remembered nothing. She woke up to the smell of ammonia. The doctor was sitting on the floor with her head in his lap. "Don't worry about it. His condition is stable and serious. He's in intensive care now," the doctor said. "Can I see him?" Jenna said quietly. "Of course, the nurse will show you now," calmly spoke the man. As they walked up to the 4th floor, Jenna thought that maybe Christopher would be uncomfortable that she would see him like this, and he wouldn't want her to watch or something. Her legs were shaking, and her whole body was tense. She was put on booties, a cap, gloves, a robe. And when they brought her in, the tears just rolled out of her eyes. "Talk to him. He can hear you," the nurse told her. And Jenna took his hand and just couldn't get any words out because she knew if she did, she would just start sobbing. Christopher was lying on the bed. He was hooked up to a ventilator. There were also various small tubes sticking out of his arms and everywhere else. After standing there for a moment, she realized she couldn't be here anymore. Out. And then in the corridor she fainted again. "Don't be so worried," the nurse told her. "All right." The girl walked out of the hospital on woozy legs. One thing was for sure, he was alive. And Jenna knew for sure that he would live on. Now every day she would arrive at the hospital in the morning and leave in the evening. At first, while he was in the ICU, Jenna didn't do anything. Just sometimes they'd let her in there. She talked to the person she loved. And then when Christopher was moved to the ICU, Jenna would visit him. She helped him get out of bed, walk the halls. After he was taken off the ventilator, a tube was inserted into his throat. He breathed through it for a while. It was hard, but the girl loved him so much that all the heaviness faded into the background. Christopher could not walk, could not move his arm, and could not speak, because after the tube was taken out of his neck, all the air went out through that hole. You had to cover it with your hand to say anything. Mostly he whispered, but when he tried to say something, it sounded like Darth Vader from Star Wars. He also couldn't close his right eye because his facial nerve was hit. When a month had passed, he was discharged home. Jenna arrived at the hospital. She picked up her favorite person from there. He was in diapers. He couldn't move around on his own. On his legs, his arm wouldn't move at all. His eye could see, but he couldn't blink all the time. The girl brought him home. She knew she had to go to rehab soon. She dropped everything and was only there for him. "Christopher, you and I will be going to rehab soon," she told him. The girl did everything the hospital told her to do. They took pills, gave her some shots. They took a cab to the rehabilitation center, but it did not take them further than the barrier, and Jenna had to carry the young man on her own. She carried him, and they were assigned a room where they had to live together. Every day, Chris Storer was taken to different procedures, and he really felt better. And when they were discharged after 2 weeks, Jenna took all the recommendations of the doctors. She was given a lot of methodical literature, which described different types of massage, facial articulation, and other procedures. She wasn't going to stop with what she was doing now. When they arrived home, they practiced Christopher on a daily basis. They would say different proverbs, say letters to develop the speech apparatus. Afterward, ideally, they would walk on a bench. But since Jenna didn't have a bench at home, she put a ribbon on the floor, and Christopher had to walk on that tape. The girl took him everywhere, back at the rehab center. The doctor who worked with Christopher advised Jenna to get disability. She found out everything. She gathered all the documents, took the young man there, and they got a group. Now, although Christopher did not work, but some money fell on his card every month. In summer, she left her job and got a job in a health center, which was in Sosnovyj Bor, and took Christopher there with her. Fresh air and exercise had a favorable effect on the young man's condition. So a year passed. By this time, Christopher was already walking on his own. They had almost completely developed his arm. If before it was hanging like a whip, now he could move it, but only the hand remained a problem. Also, Christopher started to speak, but only the eye was a problem. "Good morning, my love. How are you feeling?" Jenna asked him every morning. "Good morning. Fine." He hugged her then. When they arrived from the rehab center, Christopher turned to her and told her, as best he could, that he loved her. Those were the most important words she wanted to hear from a young man. Now that things were more or less working out for him, they were sitting in the kitchen, talking about something. And suddenly, we all took Jenna's hand. "Would you marry me?" he asked her. "Of course," she answered, not doubting anything. "Then you'll be the first person I say those words to." He smiled. Jenna was happy. She just didn't know how to put it into words. "Mom, I'm marrying Simeon," called the girl that same night to her. "Why do you need that invalid?" her mother told her. "You don't understand anything. I love him more than anything in the world. I don't need anyone but him," she said. "Jenna, think 100 times about marrying him," her mother warned her. "I don't have to think about it. I've been ready for it for a long time." The girl didn't listen to anyone. Many friends condemned her that she threw all her strength to restore the young man, said that he was not suitable for her and everything else. But she did not listen to anyone. And when they decided to make a wedding, they just applied. And on the appointed day they came, signed, congratulated each other, and the two of them went to celebrate it all. "I love you very much," pressed Jenna against him. She was ready to be always by his side and never go anywhere. "And you are the love of my life," he told her. They were happy until Jenna got pregnant. When she informed Christopher about it, he was overjoyed with the news. As long as she was working, she was fine. But when she went on maternity leave, and there was practically no income at all, the family began a small scandal. The pension that Christopher received was not enough for anything at all, and it needed a lot. "Are you not going to do anything?" the girl asked her husband. "What do you want me to do?" he asked in reply. "I don't know. You're a man, can't you think of anything?" She was almost crying. "You see, I can't." He was lying on the couch. "Can I? My stomach's churning, and I have to do something and earn money somewhere." The girl was crying. After Jenna gave birth, it was decided that she would go to work and Christopher would stay home with the baby. How can you trust him with a small child? I told her mother off. "Mom, he's a father. He understands everything and knows what to do. Especially he already had a little daughter," said the girl to the woman. "I don't know. If something happens, then blame yourself. You can't fix anything," she told her. "All right, moms, that's enough. I have my own head on my shoulders." Lately, Jenna had become very irritable. Not only did she have a hormonal breakdown, she had to run home every 2 o'clock to feed the baby. Work was taking longer than usual. Christopher didn't just sit at home either. When Emily was still a baby, after Jenna fed her, she would just go to bed. And now that she was 5 months old, she needed to be held in her arms, facing forward all the time. The little girl was realizing the world. Why were the dishes not washed at home again? She'd come in irritated from work. "I'm with the baby all day." "What dishes?" Christopher told her. "And I'm tired all day at work. I'm just trying to make sure there's some income in the house," Jenna yelled at him. It was clear to both of them that they were both tired, but there was no way they could communicate that to each other. Soon after that, when Emily started kindergarten, Christopher would take her in the morning and bring her back in the evening. Yeah, he made Jenna's life easier, but she wasn't idle either. Sometimes she worked Monday through Friday. She worked weekends so she could get double pay, which meant a bigger paycheck. "Why are you sitting on your phone again?" she said to herself. "I can't even sit on my phone anymore." I looked at her. "I don't know. I can't do it anymore. I'm tired of this life. All my nerves are shot," Jenna replied. She would go to the bathroom, close herself up, and sit there, sometimes crying. She really didn't know what to do. Soon Christopher figured out a way for them to make money from the comfort of their own home. They began to make it all a reality. "I'm off to work in the morning," Jenna said. Christopher was taking his daughter to daycare. Jenna was on her way to work, and now she was doing what Christopher had come up with and working in parallel. Money began to appear in the family. Along with it, expensive appliances, computer, TV, laptop, and everything else. The family could afford more now, and Jenna seemed to settle down. But there was more and more work to do. And now it wasn't enough that she was working hard during the day and moonlighting, but there were still things to do at night. "I can't take it anymore. I'll go crazy soon." She was lying next to her husband. He didn't seem to have any problems at all. He slept well at night. He could do it during the day. One day, Jenna received a call from the employment center and was told that one of the organizations required a worker on a quota for a place. Of course, she grasped this information as a straw. Again, she gathered all the documents, came home. "Christopher, I found you a job. Here's the paperwork. Go apply." She handed him a file of papers. Yes, perhaps with this the girl stressed her husband, but she did not know how to do otherwise. All people live like this. Yes, they pay pennies there. He told her. So what? It's a long service. They'd been together for a few years, and Jenna didn't understand why things had changed so much and why do I need seniority. Christopher didn't understand. All people work. Why do you think you're so special? The girl didn't get it. Now that her daughter was older, Christopher had to do something with her. But on the weekends, they had to take Emily to a singing class, and I had to do something to keep her entertained. Jenna was torn. She cooked at home. Then she'd go out with her daughter, and then she had to go to work. I can't. She came home and lay down on the couch. Get some rest, Christopher said calmly. Good for you to talk. What are we going to eat? She grinned. We can live without frills. He was sure of his words. Lately, Jenna realized that they had drifted apart. She dialed her friend's number. Hi, she told her. Come and visit. After the greeting, her friend called her. I will. She packed up the department and they left the house together. While visiting, the girl could exhale a little. In the back of her mind, she remembered that she had feelings for Christopher, and as strong as before. But housework, work, and everything else, so exhausting that she wanted nothing more. Did you go through the store? A friend was wondering. Sure. Displayed Jenna a bottle of wine on the table. That's good. We'll rest now, said the girlfriend. Here, visiting lapdog. Jenna could relax. She was not thinking about anything. The daughter was busy with her friend's daughter. They were about the same age. And the girls were sitting in the kitchen talking. You look very tired, Alina said. I know that myself. Jenna realized that if before she always had her nails painted, eyes painted, hair styled, then now she didn't care about that. A ponytail on her head, nothing at all on her hands. Go on vacation, suggested Alenka. I can't. Shook her head Jenna. They could sit up till late at night. And then Jenna and her daughter would drive home. Christopher was already asleep. She developed, washed her face, and lay down next to him. Where was it yesterday? He asked in the morning. You know Elena didn't have a rash. Now I had a headache. How do I know all this? Christopher answered it all. That's it. I don't want to talk anymore, wrinkled Jenna. She had finally poured boiling water into her mug and was now trying to take a sip of the scalding drink. What else don't you want? He was kind of cocky. Christopher, please. I'll be right out, doing the dishes and vacuuming. She asked him, what if I don't feel like it? He wasn't acting like he always does. You know, when you needed help, I did everything, whether I wanted to or not. She would never have told him that, but now he's really pissed her off. And nobody asked you to. Those were the most hurtful words Christopher ever said to his wife. Well, you didn't say no once. She came over because she felt like she might cry. Did you misunderstand? Apparently, he realized he said the wrong thing. And now he was trying to get out of it. I'm going to work. Can you feed Emily when she wakes up? She turned around and pretended to be busy. Will you be long? Christopher asked her as he followed Jenna down the hall. I don't know, she shrugged. Good, he wanted to kiss her. But Jenna was already out. She couldn't show anyone her weakness. No, she's strong. She's got a baby. There's a mom to help. And there's Christopher, who has a hard time too. She wiped her tears, exhaled, and moved on. Jenna arrived at work. There was a lot to do. Today was a small children's party. The script was ready. It was left to hide the tasks that were meant for the kids. Jenna did everything. She knew that in 3 o'clock it would be over. When the kids arrived, Jenna was already in costume. She was smiling, taking everyone along with her. It was a lot of fun. The kids were laughing. They ran, played, and danced. At the very end, Jenna put on a show for the kids, after which everyone started to disperse, and the presenters cleaned up what was left after the party. But that was it. And now home. She looked around the room and went to change. She went up to her office, changed, and was ready to go out, while she said goodbye to the watchman who had just come in. Jack asked tiredly, Aha, but that's okay. Smiled Jenna. Okay, have a happy journey so far. He looked and smiled. Thank you. It was nice to have a lot of people respecting her around here. She went outside, walked down the porch, and went to the gate. Excuse me, she heard from across the parking lot. Yes, she turned and saw a very handsome man heading in her direction. She'd seen him at the party today. He was picking up one of the kids. I'm sorry to be like this, but I didn't know how to meet you. He told her. Why would you want to meet me? She didn't understand a thing. She liked him. He didn't hide it. Good. Why don't you drive me home? Jenna looked at the car from which the stranger had gotten out a few minutes ago. She didn't really want to take public transportation. Of course, gladly, he took the bags from her hands and led her to Robert's car. He got behind the wheel. Jenna looked at him. A beautiful name, just like you. He tried to compliment her. Everyone, let's go already. She sighed. Maybe we can stop for a meal on the way. Are you tired from work? I guess I offered my wife. Good. Jenna at that moment does not know why she agreed, because her husband and daughter were waiting for her at home. Wow. And I thought you would refuse me. Robert was surprised and smiled. But I agreed. The girl laughed. That's good. They stopped near a small restaurant. They went in. Robert ordered something. Jenna couldn't decide for a long time. She hadn't eaten anything since this morning, so now she wanted everything. Finally, she did it. Now they both waited for the order to arrive. Silent. How about some wine? Robert suggested. You're driving, aren't you? She was surprised. I'm here for you to relax, he explained. I could use a glass, agreed Jenna. Then Robert made a sign to the waiter. He came over and took the order. I'm so uncomfortable sitting here with you, Jenna said. And for some reason I felt ashamed of myself. Why? He didn't understand. My husband and child are waiting for me at home, and I'm sitting here with another man, drinking wine. She smiled. What's the big deal? I'm just here with a good friend to unwind a little. Of course, that wasn't true at all. Who's at your house? She asked the question because it had been plaguing her since she had met Robert today. Cat, he shrugged. I don't know what else to say. Isn't there a wife? She asked in complete seriousness. What makes you think I have one? Robert didn't understand. What do you mean? Whose baby did you pick up today? She admitted to him that she'd seen it. It's his nephew, his sister's son, he reassured her. At that moment their order was brought to them. They started to eat. Either Jenna had not eaten in a long time, or the food here was simply divine. She was alive, and at this point she let out a groan, rolled her eyes. Do you always eat like this? Robert laughed. Oh, sorry. The girl realized what she had done wrong. No, it's nice to look at it. He smiled. You never told me why you came up to me. They knew each other, just a little. But Jenna felt with him as if she had known him for a long time. What do you mean you didn't tell me because you liked it? Me and the guys were at your place once, and I noticed you back then. He said that and stopped smiling. What did this girl notice so sadly? A few sips of wine on an empty stomach had done the trick. She was relaxed and open-mouthed. You have a husband, kids, and I wanted us to make something work, he told her. What's wrong with you? She's tense. No, it's okay. We'll be friends. He reached out and touched her. After they ate, Robert paid and they went to the car. Should we go for another drive? He asked Jenna. No, I have to go home. She shook her head. Okay, can I have your cell phone? He asked and glanced at the girl. Yes, she answered calmly. They drove to the house where Jenna lived. She got out of the car. All right, promised his wife, and did not leave while on stage, walked into the driveway. It was nice to have someone else paying attention to her. The girl went into the house. Everything was the same there. No one had done anything. Christopher was lying on the couch again. As usual, she dropped her things and walked to the kitchen. Emily was sitting at the table drawing something. I'm hungry, she said, now turned Jenna to the stove, and thought to herself that her husband could at least do something. After she got everything done, fed the baby and bought her up and put her to bed. She wanted to talk to Christopher, walked into the room. Have you been drinking on the job? He asked, and he didn't take his eyes off the screen of his phone. Stopped at a restaurant afterward to eat. Had a glass, didn't make a deal. What, she wasn't alone? That's all. Did you sit there alone? Christopher asked. Yes, that's all he needed to know. Okay, good night. He turned sideways. Aren't we going to talk? She was in shock. Nothing. He kept staring at his phone. Okay. She got up and went to her daughter's house. It was frustrating to the point of tears. Why does everything have to be like this? She tries her best to make sure everything at home is good, and nobody appreciates it. Everything is taken for granted. Jenna was back at work this morning. Robert had texted her to say good morning. She smiled and replied to him. A correspondence started between them. It seemed to the girl that it distracted her a lot from everyday life. "I will come tonight," wrote Robert on Friday. "Good," she replied to him. Jenna knew her husband would be picking up her daughter from daycare, and she was going to Neil today anyway. So it was okay to ride for a couple hours. She waited for him at the gate. Robert pulled up. Jenna got into the car and said hello to him once again. "Where are we going?" the young man asked. "I don't know. Maybe the same restaurant where we were the first time," she suggested. Well, he didn't care as long as with her they had already learned a lot about each other during the week-long correspondence. Now they had some common topics to talk about. "How are you?" Robert started with the usual question. "Fine," Jenna shrugged. Nothing had changed in her life. "I see. You don't want to talk." He looked at the girl. "Order me some wine," she asked. Just like last time, Robert showed the waiter that he needed to come over. He did as the girl asked. They sat there, smiling at each other. Robert took Jenna's hand. "Don't." She pulled it away. "Why?" "I can see you're not feeling well," he said. What didn't she realize? Should we drop everything and change things for the better? He asked her. "No. What are you, Christopher?" She began to tell how they met, how they found out about the disease, and how she nursed him back to health. "You're like Mother Teresa." He was serious. "It's okay," Jenna said sadly. "Yeah, I see they brought their order. Just like last time. It was delicious." Robert was saying something, telling about his work, making the girl laugh. It was nice to be with this man. It took her mind off everything that had been happening to her lately. "Let's go to my place," asked Jenna Robert. "No," she said firmly then. "Where to?" He didn't want to let her go. "Home. Come on, I'll show you." She got up from the table. Great. He was glad Jenna wasn't going anywhere. Did the girl say where to go today? It was on the outskirts of town. When they were there, Robert marveled at how beautiful it was here. A highway followed by a field, and then the horizon. It all blended together. "Do you realize why I brought you here?" she asked. "Yes, it's beautiful," he agreed with her. They just sat in the car and looked into the distance. Afterwards, Jenna asked him to drive her home. Robert turned to her, ran his hand over her cheek, leaned in, wanted to kiss her. "No," she turned away. I don't understand why he was looking at someone he liked. "I have a husband. I love him," the girl said. "I see," sighed the young man. "Let's go then." She waited for him to start the engine. "You know, I can see you're not feeling well," he said softly. "Robert, don't ruin the relationship we have," Jenna asked him. "Okay. I'm sorry." He started the car and they drove off. "I'm home." She went into the apartment. No one answered. Jenna walked over to her daughter, stroked her head, kissed her, asked if she was hungry. After Emily said that she and Daddy had eaten, Jenna headed into the other room where Christopher was lying on the couch again. He was with his tablet today. "Is that okay?" she asked. "What are you talking about?" He didn't understand. "I'm at work all day and you haven't gone anywhere," the girl said. She looked at her husband and realized that there was a problem in their family and it had to be solved somehow. She didn't want to leave him because she loved something from me. "Do you want to?" he asked. I sat down to talk. Jenna leaned over to him and kissed him. "Have you been drinking again?" He heard the smell from her. "Look, if things were good in my family, would I be doing this?" She remembered how good things used to be. "Are you trying to accuse me of something now?" He turned around. "No," she shook her head. "Then what?" He looked at her with one eye. "Let's go to a psychologist," Jenna suggested. "I don't need any psychologist." He sounded sure of it. "I do." I was ashamed to admit it, but it was true. "Well, go for it." It was obvious he didn't want to talk to Jenna anymore. She went into the kitchen. She wanted to cry, but she knew it wouldn't help her. The next day, when the girl came to work, she saw that there were flowers on the table. "Who brought these?" was surprised Jenna. "I don't know. The watchman brought them," he said. "What's for you?" The coworkers answered. "Okay, thanks. Nice." She took a photo and sent it to Robert. "Your handiwork." She captioned the photo. "What did you want to make you feel good in the morning?" "Moody," he told her. "Thank you." Now she sent it to him. In the evening, he waited for her again. "Why are you doing this? Apart from being friends, you and I can't be anything else." She said it with confidence. "Let's go. I'll just drive you home." He opened the door for her. Jenna got in. They drove off. They didn't talk about anything today. When they got to the driveway, she wanted to get out, but Robert took her hand. "Tell me, do you really love him, or do you just feel sorry for him?" he asked the girl. "What kind of question is that?" She put her foot out into the street, and her hand Robert held it that way. "Answer," he waited. "If you don't let go now, we won't socialize at all anymore," she told him. "Sorry," he let her go, and Jenna walked quickly toward the entryway. At home, everything was the same. For a long time, nothing had changed at all. Almost every day, Robert would come over to Jenna's house, but she wouldn't let him do anything. She just hung out with him. It was relaxed and fun and interesting. "Are you working again today?" One day on his day off, Christopher came up to his wife. "Probably haven't called yet," Jenna said. Christopher came to her, hugged her. Jenna immediately remembered how tender he was and what they had before. "Maybe we could go out," she suggested. "No, I don't feel like going out." He spoke in her ear. "Why does it like this?" Jenna asked. "I don't know." He shrugged his shoulders. "Let's go on vacation. I'll buy the vouchers. We'll take a vacation without Emily," Jenna suggested again. "Good." Christopher was even happier. "Then I'll look for a vacation tomorrow." Jenna smiled. She turned and kissed Christopher. Tonight they slept together. Everything was fine. The next day, he wished his wife good morning and made coffee. "Thank you." She was home for the second day in a row in the last 6 months. No one had called her into work. Jenna sat down at the computer to search for travel vouchers. She sat for a long time, choosing. Sometimes Christopher came up to her, asking questions, offering advice. When Jenna had everything done, all that was left was to pay. She did that. The flight was a week away. Now she had to talk to the principal about taking the short vacation. "Are you ready?" She had packed all her bags, Emily, taken to her mom's house, and was now ready for anything. She hadn't spoken to Robert in a week. He had won her over with texts and calls. But Jenna didn't want to pay attention to that. Sure enough, Christopher was smiling. The next day, the couple hailed a cab. They drove to the airport. In the car, Christopher held Jenna's hand, and afterward they took their bags and went to check in. Then a few hours on the airplane, and now they were almost near the sea. Their hotel stood near the sea itself. Now they were heading there. When they got into the room, they were amazed at the view from the window. On the first day, they went to the beach, but only to scout the situation. Everything was gorgeous. At first, Christopher went everywhere with Jenna, but after a couple days, he got carried away with his tablet again and didn't want to go anywhere. "Are you really not interested in anything?" Jenna asked him. "Why go out every day?" He didn't understand, but we could lie at home. They started fighting again. And what he didn't understand are grievances. Nothing, so Jenna turned around and walked away. "Where are you going?" Asked after Christopher. "To the sea. I want to be alone." And found. And cried again. Why does she always have to be alone? He's never around. Always, whatever difficulties or joys there were in life. The girl was alone with it all. It was at this point that Jenna decided to text Robert to say hi. She typed the message. "I thought you weren't going to write anymore," he replied after a second. Sorry, she didn't know what else to write. "I totally understand." "When are you coming back?" he asked. "How do you know?" She was curious. "I was at your work. They said you were on vacation," Robert admitted. "I see." After a week, she didn't keep anything from him. "Can I hope to see you again?" Robert asked her. Probably yes. She wasn't sure, but for some reason she wanted to. Good. Then I look forward to your return, he wrote. Great. Bye. She wrote and looked out at the sea blue in the distance. It was so beautiful. Jenna relaxed a little. Right now, she was wishing she had brought Emily with her. She would be running around here now. She would have loved it for sure. The rest of the week went well, but that was it for Jenna. Christopher went to the sea a couple more times and spent the rest of the time in the hotel on the bed. We're flying home tomorrow. Let's at least spend tonight together. Jenna asked her husband, Are we not together? It became strange to him, as if yes, but as if not. She approached him. Jenna, understand, I get tired quickly, and I just don't want to go anywhere. He took her hand. I understand, but the sea air is good for you, especially for you. She leaned over and kissed him. So it gets here, in the room. Christopher pointed to the open window. Yes, but that's not it at all. She looked where he was pointing. Jenna finally managed to convince her husband to take her to the restaurant. He sat, ate, didn't talk about anything. Beautiful music came on. Let's dance, Jenna called him. No, it's not my thing. He said no. Okay. Jenna realized she felt like crying again. They went home. The next day, they had to fly home. Jenna bought some souvenirs. The bags were packed. They were ready to go. The airplane was silent. In the car, too. They were finally home. I'll pick up Lee on the way. Wanted Jenna to see her friend and cry, but only she came out of the house. She spotted Robert's car and pulled up. What are you doing here? She asked him. You don't know. He looked at her and smiled. I see. She looked up at her windows. And what do you understand? He took her hand and pulled her to him. Wait. She walked around the car and sat in the front seat. And what next? He was getting curious. Let's go, she asked. Robert complied with her request. They drove off again where it had once been so beautiful. Do you mind? He turned to the girl. No, not even in favor. She smiled. Why does she have such a good relationship with this man? Willing to do a lot of things for her, and the husband she loves so much is willing to do nothing. Tell me. They stopped, and Robert turned to her. What is there to tell? We've been on vacation for so many days, and he hasn't even left the room. Jenna said indignantly, Let's go to my place. He touched her chin. Let's go. She nodded no way. He quickly started the car. They drove off. On the way, Emily called her mom and told her that they were having problems with Christopher. She's coming over tomorrow. And I warned you. Her mom reminded her of what she said before the wedding. Oh, don't start, please, asked her daughter. Okay, we'll wait for tomorrow, the woman said and hung up. Is everything okay? Asked the man behind the wheel. Yes, nodded Jenna. She had made up her mind today that she would go with him and try to build a completely different relationship, but she didn't know if she could do it or not. They arrived and went up to Robert's apartment. He immediately set up a table, got some wine, some appetizers. He took a beer from the fridge himself. What were you getting ready? It made the girl laugh. No, but it was always there just in case. He smiled, opened his wine, filled his glass, then got himself a beer. Thank you for your support. She toasted okay, and thank you for everything. He took a small sip. For what? She didn't understand. For what you are. He reached for her, wanting to kiss her. Jenna was ready for it. She even closed her eyes. But then she pictured Christopher, remembered how much she loved him, and what they had. No, I can't. She turned away and opened her eyes. Here we go, Robert sighed. I'm sorry, I can't. She stood up. Where are you going? The landlord didn't understand. I have to go home. She went into the hallway. Jenna, wait. He followed her. No, I'm sorry for all the nerve. Is there something you're hoping for? But I love my husband, and I need to go home, she said. All right. He didn't try to talk her out of it. Jenna left his apartment. She went home reluctantly. She knew there was nothing new waiting for her there, but she went anyway. She wanted to talk to her husband. Maybe now he would hear her and understand. What if she told him about Robert? Tell him a young man was hitting on her. I wonder what his reaction would be. She asked herself. Even though Robert had offered to drive her, she hadn't accepted. She needed to take a walk to think. At that moment, Mom texted. She told her to go to them if things were bad. Or maybe she really should go to her mom's. She stopped, but after that she waved her head and went home, even though she didn't really want to. I opened the door at home and she walked in. But when she turned around, I froze with surprise. There was nothing in the apartment. She could see that from the hallway. The TV, computer, laptop, all the appliances from the kitchen, anything of any value was missing. Jenna's first thought was that the apartment had been burglarized. She rushed to the wall, opened the closet where there was a jewelry box and money. What it was, she couldn't believe her eyes. The rings, earrings, and bracelets were there, but the money was missing. Clearly, if it had been thieves, they would have taken everything. But here she walked further, saw that there were no clothes in the closet, went to the nightstand. There were no papers either. She sat down on the couch and cried. Why did he do this to me? I never spared anything for him. I loved him. And he sobbed her to tears. Jenna dialed Christopher's number. He had blacklisted her. She tried to text him on social media. He blocked her there too. After that, the girl called her mom and told her everything. She went to the kitchen, opened the drawer where the medicine cabinet was. She took out a sedative and drank it. She noticed a piece of paper on the table. Walked over, smirked. It was a letter from him. In it he wrote that he loved her and thanked her for everything she'd done for him. But he realized he needed to leave. Also talked about blocking her so she wouldn't push pity in return. Jenna grinned. There was a knock on the door. She went to open it. Standing on the doorstep was Robert. What are you doing here? She was stunned. I realize that if I didn't catch up with you now, I'd lose you forever, he told her. Robert, he's gone. She showed him the empty apartment. What a bastard. His fists clenched. That's enough. She led her guest into the kitchen. They sat down at the table. Jenna poured tea, showed Robert what the man she loved so much and was willing to die herself to save him had written to her. I see. He read it. Pack your bags. I don't get it. She looked at him with red eyes. Let's go to my place. He wasn't asking now, he was affirming. I didn't even, she said. He walked up to her and started kissing her. It was so unexpected that Jenna responded. There would be no objection. He took the bag and started putting some of her things in it. Let me do it. She took it from him. Great, Robert said. Emily stopped in the hallway. Jenna, just like you wanted, we'll pick her up tomorrow. He put his arm around her shoulders and led her outside. You're walking. The girl was surprised. She'd never seen him without a car. I had a beer, he reminded her. They came to his house. He poured her wine and sat her in an armchair. Look, you need to calm down. I don't want things to work out between you and me. You can stay with me for a while. We'll pick up your daughter tomorrow, and I'll help you with everything. Now he's acting like Jenna with Christopher. Thank you for everything. She clung to him from the soothing wine and tears. Jenna quickly boiled it down. Robert carried her to the bed, covered her with a plaid, and closed the door behind him. He really liked her and would do anything to make sure she reciprocated him. The next day, Jenna did not go to work. She said she had a family emergency. She went to her mom's house, who worked 2 and 2, and it was her day off. Hi. She came into the apartment. Hello, her mom hugged her. And Jenna started crying again. No need to shed tears, so it was meant to be. In fact, the woman was angry, but she couldn't say anything bad right now. Knew her daughter would still be on his side. They went into the kitchen. They sat there talking for a long time. You know who helped me? Jenna asked her mom. No, of course not. She looked at her surprised. I have an acquaintance whom I think it's today we'll meet, said the girl. Just acquaintances, or her mother looked at her enigmatically. Mom just smiled for now. Jenna, It makes me happy that you are smiling." They hugged each other again. In the evening, Jenna went to daycare, picked up her daughter, and together they drove to Robert's house. And then they went with him to Mom's to keep her informed. "Hello." Robert entered the apartment and gave the woman flowers. "Come in," she invited him in. When everyone met and sat down at the table, a casual conversation began. "You know how much I love your daughter, and if it were up to me, I'd propose to her today," Robert said. "But that's okay. Now they'll divorce. And go ahead." Green light. The woman smiled. Jenna was putting Emily to bed at that moment. She came back, only to hear the end of the conversation. "They married me without me." She smiled. "Come back, daughter. And I advise you not to ignore Robert. You can see at once that this is a good man." Mom began to say. "Calm down. My husband left me yesterday. And you're already giving me a new one," Jenna said sternly. "Why is he?" That hurt Robert. "Okay, don't fight. Time will sort things out," said the wise woman. "That's right." Today Robert said goodbye to Jenna, went home. The girl went back to work. She could not think about Simeon. As soon as she started to do so, tears came to her eyes. "Why do you need him?" "Forget it. Go and file for divorce," colleagues used to say. Robert came every night. He met the girl, gave flowers, until he calmed down and made no attempts to get closer. A month passed. Jenna kept waiting to see if he would call or write, but Christopher never showed up. Under pressure from her mom and friends, she filed for divorce. In a month, she was to be a free woman. Emily suffered the most. She cried just like her mom when she found out her dad had left. Everything would be all right. Resolved Jenna that she would not cry anymore. Ino looked at her daughter and hugged her. They stayed at Jenna's mother's house for a while longer, but all the time it could not last. And at some point the girl asked Robert to take her home. He did everything she asked. He has the most beloved woman. A month later, her mom called, asked how she was doing. And then she said she was expecting her for a visit tonight. "So give me the weekend." Jenna was surprised, because today was Wednesday. "No, I need you to come today." Mother insisted. "Okay." The girl didn't understand the urgency. She picked Emily up from daycare and drove to her mother's house. When she arrived, it was business as usual. "Mom, what was the urgency?" she wanted to know. "Come in," she called her into the room. Wow. Jenna went there and saw a gorgeous table that was set and stood in the middle. "Why are you surprised?" Sat down on the table, the woman sat down. I don't know what kind of celebration she showed with her eyes at everything that was here. You'll find out soon enough. At that moment there was a knock on the door. Mother went to open it. On the threshold stood Robert. He was wearing a suit and carrying flowers. Jenna immediately understood everything. She smiled. Robert walked up to her, looked at the woman and the girl who were standing there. "Jenna, will you be my wife?" He held out a box to her. "I don't even know." She looked at everyone. "Mommy, say yes." Her daughter held up her finger. You'd think she was looking at the man across the table. "You first before the answer, and then think as much as you want," spoke Robert. "Okay, I'll do it." She was angry with paint and took the flowers and the box. "You made the right choice." Kissed her. Robert kissed her. "So now to the table." The mother was happy with the way things turned out. They sat and talked, and then Robert asked her to come with him. "Emily, are you staying here?" Her grandmother asked her. Yes, she nodded and looked at her mother. "Don't you think it's going too fast?" Jenna asked Robert when they were already outside. "It's okay. I love you very much." He was bringing her over to his place. "I can't tell you the same thing yet," the girl admitted. "I don't have to yet," he smiled. "Thank you." She pressed herself against him. Tonight, when they arrived at the man's apartment, he was finally able to kiss her. Jenna was smiling, and Robert could see that he could make her happy. "I have to go to work tomorrow," she told him and looked at her watch. "Stop thinking about it already." He kissed her again. And then the wedding preparations began. Robert wanted not just a wedding. He wanted a wedding, and the most beautiful one. For his beloved Robert dreamed of her becoming a princess. "What are you thinking?" Jenna saw that he was often pensive. "Did he tell you the truth? And what did you have in mind?" She began to wonder. "Nothing." He winked at his future wife. "Okay, it's always secrets." She was really happy. And now she couldn't think about the man who'd betrayed her. The day of the wedding had arrived. Jenna was wearing a beautiful dress. Next to her stood the groom. He was also very handsome. Guests, relatives, and friends congratulated. Everyone wished only happiness and great love. "Daughter, don't doubt him. He'll be a great husband and father." "Mommy, I'm happy for you," Emily said to her. "Thank you, family." Jenna smiled and hugged them. "And you dare to be unhappy? And stop reminiscing about the past," threatened the woman with a finger. "Good," she nodded. They arrived home in the evening. It wasn't any easier with them today either. "Are you really so perfect?" Did the wife look at her husband? Naturally, she didn't. "Waited this long to start bullying you now?" He laughed. She pounded him in the chest with her fist. "You have no idea how much I love you." He pulled her to him for the second time that evening. "Do I love you?" She spoke softly. "What? What did you say?" "Say it again." He looked at her. "I love you." She wasn't looking at him. "Jesus, Jenna, we're gonna be the happiest couple ever." Robert started kissing her. "Thank you." She closed her eyes, and it seemed like she was the happiest person on earth. "Can you promise me something?" he asked his wife. "Sure." She looked up at him. "Stop being strong. I'll do anything for you." He pushed her a little away from him and was now looking straight into her eyes. "I don't know how to do that." She remembered what she had done before. "But you'll learn, promise." Didn't let go of her hands. "I'll do my best." She nodded, but didn't take her eyes away. "Good. I believe you. You're my love forever. And I swear to you that you'll be like a stone wall behind me." He pulled her to him again. "Thank you." With one lip, the girl said. She believed that happiness might be smiling upon her now.
Subscribe and click the bell.
I took care of your disabled father for 10 years, and now that he is gone, he decided to get rid of me like a piece of junk. The woman's outrage was unparalleled. I gave up my favorite job, postponed the birth of our children, and all for your sake, so that you could continue to advance in your career, and you, scoundrel, found another. Not only that, but she has a child with you. Claire grabbed her purse and ran out of the apartment. Claire and Jordan had been married for 10 years. They met at a college party and never separated again. "I'll pick you up tomorrow." The first night they met, Jordan said boldly, "Yeah, come by." Claire readily agreed. Every morning a whistle sounded under her window, followed by a not too loud whistle. "Claire, the carriage is here." Looking up to Claire's window on the 5th floor, Jordan was already standing below, with a briefcase under his armpit. Just then, Claire's black head, with its wavy curls, appeared in the open flame and her usual, now Jordan." 3 minutes later, Claire would jump out of the doorway, and the long Jordan would take another briefcase, a girl's briefcase, under her armpit. They returned from class together, too. 6 months of meetings were enough for them to realize that they were made for each other. "Where are you going, to the library?" Claire asked her cheerful classmate. "Yeah, you." "Are you going there, too?" And the young people walked together. "Shall we go to the movies?" suggested Jordan, and I was just dreaming of a new movie. Claire was excited. Movies, books, and music, they liked the same things, or almost the same things. Even in the student cafeteria, everything was resolved to the advantage of both of them. He loved the crumb of bread, she the crusts, and by ordering the vinaigrette, Claire always knew that the peas, which she couldn't stand, would be sparingly eaten by Jordan. Just look at these misers. It's a natural plushkin with a box. They have every trip to the canteen so profitable. Their buddies laughed, pointing their fingers at the couple. Even with the current abundance of everything in the stores, it was not difficult. Christopher, his son and daughter-in-law, did all his errands perfectly. He was content, although he was very sad after the sudden death of his wife 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack. He had grown fond of the cheerful, troublesome daughter-in-law. "Claire, you look so much like Jordan, Mama," he told her often. "Just as troublesome and never angry. And my Betty, she was just as easygoing." Claire would rush to hug a sad Christopher. Come on now. Come on, it's all right, we're here." The elderly man tried to discreetly wipe away involuntary tears, and soon got used to the lightning visits of Claire, who whirlwind carried around his small apartment, immediately put it in order. "Christopher," she shouted from his bedroom, "do you want that old shabby chair? Why don't we throw it away, and Jordan will bring you a new one tomorrow?" Christopher instantly forgot about the sadness and ran as hard as he could to save his favorite chair, as old and dilapidated as he was. Next time, as soon as her father-in-law's mood became sad, she again found something just as precious and frightened him with the expulsion of the precious object to the garbage. The father-in-law piously believed that his daughter-in-law's efforts were caused solely by her love of order and new things. He didn't realize how Claire was laughingly telling her husband in the evening, "Do you know how she scared Daddy today? He's sitting there looking at an old picture, you know. Remember your mom? Oh, him again. He was upset. You know, he loved Mom very much." "Yeah, I know." Claire stopped him. "I wanted to distract him. I frightened him with the chair that time, and today I threatened to throw away the antique clock, the one that doesn't work, and my father was so angry with me before I left. Young people nowadays don't understand anything about good things. Young people just want to spend money, and the chair will last 100 years. Oh, he can do that." He smiled at Jordan. "I can imagine how many hours he grumbled when you left." "Let him." Claire waved her hand lightly. "At least he didn't sit around crying and crying. A little stress improves his vitality, but dinner must have calmed him down," said Jordan, leaning back in his chair and stroking his stomach. "You've never cooked as good as you did tonight, Claire." Satisfied Claire smiled contentedly and immediately commanded, "I didn't cook for nothing. I was counting on your help. The dishes are yours. Get to the sink now, come on." Of course, it was purely symbolic labor, washing dishes after a delicious dinner, but my wife was pleased. She was spinning around, serving, then a fork, then a spoon, then wiping everything washed clean, and putting it in its place. Not work, but pure pleasure, the continuation of communication, all the more joyful that now the couple did not see each other during the day. Claire came home early from her work, so that she took care of her father-in-law more and more often. Everything flowed smoothly until one day Claire was interrupted from work by a call from Jordan. "Claire." He was almost shouting into the phone. "Dad's having a stroke. My neighbor Clara called me. She's already called an ambulance, but I can't leave. I have a meeting with the Chinese in 10 minutes, you know. I'll be right there. Claire got right to the point. "I'm on my way. I'll call you later." And she was already rushing down the corridor to warn her superiors, putting on her coat and forgetting about her boots. And so she arrived at the hospital. Only getting out of the cab, she saw that she would have to walk through the puddles in her shoes. Confused, she stood by the car, not knowing where to go. "I'm sorry." The cab driver waved his hands. "You can't go any further. You see the barrier?" Claire looked at him uncomprehendingly and silently walked forward, looking for the main entrance with her eyes. She was in a hurry, as if something depended on her there, in the ward where Christopher was. Only at the emergency room did Claire realize that she would not be allowed into any room. Stroke patients were taken to the intensive care unit while it was still possible to prevent major complications from the stroke. There was no way anyone would be allowed in. The confused Claire, holding her coat in her hands, stood at the door to the intensive care unit for so long that the nurses and orderlies who ran by began to squint at her. Finally, one of them, touched by Claire's lost look, stopped and asked, "What are you waiting for, woman? We have father here," and began to explain that she and her husband were at work, that they had been told about the intensive care unit, and that she didn't know what to do. "What is the name of the patient?" With a brief nod, the nurse left, and soon the doctor, a tall, stern brunette, came out of the ward. "Well, who's here?" She said her father-in-law's name, although there was only one Claire in the hallway. Me, how is he?" "Is he alive?" Claire bailed. "He's alive if he's here." The doctor replied in a low voice, "What are you, his daughter?" "A daughter-in-law, but still a daughter." Claire said hurriedly, as if something depended on her words, "Your father suffered an ischemic stroke, and he's still in serious condition. Leave your phone number so I can contact you at any time." Could it get any worse? Claire was scared. Anything can happen in this life. The patient is stable. He's conscious. We need your phone number so that we can call you when we move him to a regular ward. He will need constant care. He is a bedridden patient. What do I need to do? What should I prepare? Claire was worried all over again. Here's a list of things to take with you to the hospital. The doctor pointed to a poster. Excuse me, I have a lot of work to do. Goodbye. Goodbye. A bewildered Claire lowered her arms, then suddenly realized, "Oh, thank you very much, doctor. Have a good day." The doctor was already closing the door behind her, but Claire had time to see a long row of catalogs on which lay men and women. As far as Claire could make out, covered only by sheets, next to them, like cranes on long legs, were racks of IVs. "Where are you, Christopher?" She tried to look out for Claire, but the door slammed shut in a second, a click sounding. Claire was already on the phone, the worried husband. "Claire, where are you? What have you got? Did you make it?" The stream of questions seemed never-ending. Finally, Jordan stopped talking and Claire was able to answer. "Yes, Jordan, I'm at the hospital. Christopher's in intensive care. They won't let me see him. He's in stable condition. I talked to the doctor, but Dad's conscious. What about him? Are you sure it's a stroke? Is there any hope he'll recover?" I was worried on the other end of the line. "Yes, as soon as the injections work and he feels better, he'll be moved to a room." "I'll be right there." "Wait for me, Claire." "Stay there. Just where is it?" She explained where it was and added, "Only you can't go through the grounds. I'll be waiting for you at the entrance to the hospital courtyard on the square side." In 10 minutes she was already sitting in a warm, cozy car and once again detailed everything again. And as soon as he is transferred to a regular ward, someone must be with him all the time because there is not enough staff to take care of every stroke patient. We don't know what condition he's in yet. For the time being, in any case, there will be bed rest, feeding, washing. The nannies can't manage it all. "Claire, you realize I can't quit my job, right? I just signed a contract with the Chinese partners. I just need to be on site." Jordan was upset. Claire already realized what was about to come out of her husband's mouth. "But this is the men's room." "Jordan, how will I be there?" "I don't know." Jordan was confused. "Why don't you call and find out? Do it in the morning, honey, and you'll do a better job. You've always been in touch with Daddy. You know roughly what he needs and how to treat him, don't you?" When a sudden disaster strikes, people start looking for a way out. There is always someone they know who has already experienced the same or similar in their lives. So it happened with Claire. Coming to work in the morning, she saw the sympathetic looks of her colleagues, began to ask questions. "Oh, Claire, how are you doing? How's your father-in-law?" "Alive, I hope." "How are you?" "How's Christopher?" The questions came one after another. All 5 women, sitting in the same office, had become friends and were aware of each other's family affairs. It turned out that the oldest of them, Doris, had once cared for a paralyzed aunt, and Lara, who had just joined the team, also had experience with her grandmother, who had suffered a stroke, but relatively mild. The first thing to do is to ask the doctor about painkillers, Doris stated. At first their pain is severe. It prevents them from starting exercises and workouts. Massage should be done lightly to relax the paralyzed side. "Oh, girls," Claire begged. "Thank you, but can I ask you to explain it all over again?" "Yes, of course," Doris and Lyra said almost in unison. "I haven't seen him. I don't know anything about his condition. By the time I get there, I'll have forgotten everything you told me." "Well, we're always in touch, Claire." Lara reassured her. "They'll tell you everything. Every sick person is looked after by someone, a wife or a daughter." "Yes." Claire was surprised. "I was afraid it was a men's ward." "Yes, it is now." Doris even laughed. "Men don't go in such places, my dear. You have to save your strength, and it's a woman's job to clean up the dirt and carry the pots out. What's it to them, heroes? They won't trifle. They'll run away in half an hour." Claire was a little hurt by the woman's words, but they were true. At least Jordan could also take at least a week's vacation, so what if they were Chinese? Surely they are not more important than his own father. There was some truth in Doris's words. There was no escaping it. She called the hospital in the afternoon, and they reassured her that it was still a short time, but that the patient's condition was normal after such a blow. If everything goes according to plan, then tomorrow perhaps will be transferred to a regular ward. Having calmed down a little, Claire finished the day's work, but just in case she arranged for a vacation. The boss was understanding, but only asked her to warn the girls in the department. "Claire, you always help your colleagues. Make sure that this time they are always ready to cover for you and keep the department on top of things." "I will," Claire replied confidently. "Our girls are great, they understand." She spent the whole day explaining things to Lara. It was supposed that she would substitute for those who had gone on vacation for the first time, which would be convenient for everyone, and at the same time she would get into the flow faster and learn different types of operations. At the same time, Claire, for some reason, could not get Doris' words about men out of her head. Walking home from work, through the quiet evening streets, she decided to put an end to this moving tangle of unpleasant feelings. At dinner at home, she looked straight into Jordan's eyes and asked, "Jordan, you love your father, don't you? Why don't you at least try, yourself, to take a few days to be near him? He'd be glad. I'd love to." Jordan answered hotly, "But as I explained to you, this is the time when things are going to get busy. If we miss the moment, someone without me will screw up, and then goodbye, foreign partners." Claire seemed to calm down. "But you know, I'm actually sure that Dad will be quite comfortable with you, and that's important in his condition." Jordan continued as if, unlike Claire, he knew his father's condition much more than she did. "Honey, You see, we could hire a nurse, but she'd be a complete stranger, and I want Dad to be with just us." Claire was again struck by the inappropriateness of that pronoun after the sentences her husband had just uttered. "Well, obviously, I can't be around him all the time. I have a job, but I'll stop by as often as I can to buy whatever he and you need. Please, Claire, will you do it?" "What's your job worth to you?" "It's a nerve-wracking job, and here you're busy and at home and everything. But I can't be torn between two houses. And who's going to feed you, clean the house, cook your things?" "Claire, really, I'm not without a hand, and my 2 years old." The woman, a little hesitated, agreed, and from the next day began her new duties. Christopher was indeed transferred to the ward the day after tomorrow. Having arrived with a large bag of what she considered necessary, Claire saw that her father-in-law was already lying on a high special bed. His eyes were closed, the skin on his face and hands glowing with dead poverty. A fat, small nurse showed Claire the duck, toilet, and bath, explained the daily routine in a businesslike manner, and fled. The 3 women who were here, some with their husbands, some with their brothers or sons, looked at Claire with curiosity and sympathy. The neighbors helped her identify things, getting to know each other little by little. Meanwhile, Christopher opened his eyes and wheezed something. He was begging for a drink. The neighbor realized. She immediately took the drinker and showed Claire how to handle it. Lifting the old man's head, she tried as carefully as possible to give him a drink, but the water poured past him. The father-in-law groaned unhappily. "Jordan?" he whispered, almost wheezed. "He's at work, Christopher." He'll come. "He couldn't yet. He's got foreigners there." Claire reassured the old man. "Don't worry, I'm with you. I'm not going anywhere." Slowly, they both adjusted to life in the hospital. It wasn't easy. Christopher, who had always been characterized by intelligence and patience, suddenly became tearful, could get cranky. "No, I won't have porridge. I can't swallow it," and he would sharply push the plate away with his healthy hand. Fortunately, he was affected by the side of the brain that does not affect speech. Intelligence didn't seem to be affected either. Only by comparing her previous interactions with the man did she realize the damage the disease had done to a man she respected. She already knew there would be outbursts of anger, groans of muscle pain, and even delirium at night. The old man, in his position, no longer had to think about shyness, since her father-in-law could not support himself, and little by little he developed the kind of trusting relationship with Claire that only a child has with its mother or nanny. All of this Claire endured. 3 weeks of treatment in the nightmarish conditions of a city hospital, with poor provision, finally came to an end. Claire said goodbye to her kind neighbors, but then a new shift of patients and caregivers had partially entered the ward. Christopher, so cordial and polite before, barely looked at his neighbors in the ward. He was all wrapped up in the cocoon of his own illness. Claire, it was a good thing. The ward is calm, even if a little depressed, and there is a complete change in his and Christopher's life. "Jordan, I ordered a pass to the territory. You drive up, right to the entrance." In the tone of an expert dispatcher, the command was to her husband on the morning of their discharge. Jordan came to pick them up in a large, comfortable car. In his arms, he carried his father from the hospital gurney into the salon. At home in the apartment had to go up only to the 2nd floor. Now Claire was with her sick father-in-law. Just gradually Claire's life returned to normal. True, now she could not find a job in her specialty, but Jordan consoled her again. "Get some rest. You need it now. Look at the weight you've lost, Claire. Get strong. Do whatever you want. I'll make sure you don't deny yourself anything. Let's see what it's like to be a housewife." Claire smiled sadly. In her new position, she found a silver lining. She read a lot, watched movies, decorated her and Jordan's cozy apartment. It turned out that things at home never end. The more you do, the more new things arise. Even at her father-in-law's, constantly obeying the wishes of the sick, she was not so busy. Now, however, it was a very welcome, spiritualized business, the troubles and joy. Having completed a small renovation of her somewhat neglected, over the years apartment, Claire was going to take care of her own health. The young woman decided to undergo an examination in the clinic and prepare for long-postponed motherhood. She had long dreamed of having children, and now her husband would have no excuses. Claire discovered that right next to their home, a new clinic opened, quite impressive looking. The flow of patients to this clinic did not expire, which inspired her faith in the reliability and professionalism of the doctors working there. She quickly found the clinic's website on the internet and called the number and made an appointment with the doctor. The doctor, by all accounts, was a good one. The walls of her offices in the paid clinic were full of all kinds of diplomas and diplomas. Having carefully examined Claire, the doctor said to her, "I rarely see healthy women, to tell you the truth. I don't see any health problems with you, so you can get dressed." Continuing to take notes, she pronounced, "Still, don't delay getting pregnant. After all, 32 years old, even by today's standards." "Actually, that's what we were planning," lied Claire, expressing her dream. "The longer you think about planning, the harder it will be for you to carry a baby. The clock is ticking," smiled the gynecologist. She thanked for the recommendations and left the doctor's office. At last she felt light and calm. After a rainy, cold summer, the weather was great, which is rare in August. It was even hot, and the coolness of the evening was so welcome. The maples glistened with green paws of leaves. The birch trees spread their long strands along the whole alley. It was a shame that such a lovely day would be wasted if it wasn't used for a walk. To breathe in as much fresh air as possible, filled with the fragrance of greenery and flowers. "God, it's beautiful," Claire gasped. No way I will not sit in four walls." The young woman decided to go to Krister's apartment, which had been empty for about a year. It should have been cleaned up long ago. At least some of the unnecessary junk should have been thrown out. Some of the things left behind should have been taken away. From the stop, Claire went not straight ahead, but down the long path. Still unable to escape the gloom, the old apartment from the bright sunshine and clean air, the keys to her father-in-law's apartment, she carried with her, a long-standing habit. Opening the door, she took a step inside, but barely entered the hallway, she realized that the dwelling was quite habitable. At that very moment, much to her surprise, a 2-year-old boy came out of the room and stared at her with his little eyes. Just then, apparently his mother came out of the kitchen. She was an attractive woman who was clearly no more than 25 to 24 years old. "Who are you?" Claire asked in astonishment. "And what are you doing here?" "I'm Adriana. This is my son, Noah. We live here." The young woman didn't seem confused at all, but she wasn't surprised at Claire's arrival. "What right do you have to be here?" Claire was even more surprised. "This is my husband's apartment, Jordan, and who are you?" The stranger felt quite in her own right, standing firmly on her feet, and she wasn't going to answer to anyone, even if it was someone who opened the door with her own keys. Apparently, "I'm your husband's wife." She hummed stupidly and walked across the apartment without asking permission. Adriana, taking the baby in her arms, followed her everywhere. Claire found many changes in the familiar surroundings of the apartment. Christopher's bed was gone, replaced by a new, wide four-poster bed. When Claire saw it, she wrinkled her nose. A sexodrome, and what kind of vulgar canopy over it? She was so disgusted to see the apparently shared bed of her husband and his mistress. And now what? Take up the knife, strike, as they say. The wardrobe in the bedroom was new, though inexpensive. Claire knew good things, but this was clearly an attempt to save money. Or had Adriana brought it from her possessions? It didn't matter at all. For some reason, however, Claire clung to every object, to the slightest change in the interior. She noted the beautiful mirror, set in a beautiful frame, and the expensive cosmetics in front of it, on the dressing table. The apartment was quite clean, but there was no sense of style and coziness created by women's hands. It was a little bit of everything. There were heavy purchases, Jordan, as if the furniture was brought directly from the house of Sobakovich Nice. Good value, insignificant trifles obviously belonged to Adriana, and also there was a lot of what was left from the previous owner, Kridster Hera. Grounded and ageless. A bookcase with numerous books and albums. A fundamental desk in the hall, or a real wooden closet for clothes in the bedroom. Strangely, this diversity of everything, the diversity of the surroundings, made it easier for Claire to accept her husband's apparent, accomplished, and long-standing adultery. Everything around was so unstable, unfounded, that she simply let the fact pass through her, not taking it to heart, or it was the first fever, the body's defensive reaction to stress. Both women were silent. She walked around the apartment, sat on the couch in the living room. "Is that Jordan's son?" she finally asked, looking at the baby's cute face. "Yes," Adriana answered calmly and evenly. "How long have you been here?" Claire asked. "Since Jordan, we have been here for 5 years," Adriana answered. 5 years? Claire bit her lip. So by the time her husband cheated on her, she had already served 5 years as a sister of mercy under her father, and for the next 5 years, her husband had enjoyed spending time with this girl, was apparently happy with her. She felt either a chill or the sensation of being splashed with ice water. He always told me to wait a while, that his wife was an invalid, and that's why he couldn't leave her. His wife needed constant care, and who would he be if he left her so helpless, couldn't part with her, pity her? Oh, pity? Claire didn't notice herself grinning ironically. Where did you meet then? At my house. Adriana answered simply. He kept promising me, saying he'd be free soon, and then we'd be together forever. How long have you lived here? For some reason, Claire asked. It's almost a year since he finally moved me and my son into his apartment, answered the interlocutor still as calmly. So I'm dead, and now there's nothing stopping you from being together. Claire sneered, unable to resist. It would appear so. I'm sorry, I didn't realize it wasn't what Jordan said. I love him and I believed what he said. Without any embarrassment, Adriana said. For some reason she had decided that she could tell her husband's wife everything in detail, and that it was even necessary to do so. Serenely patting her son on the back, she looked peacefully at Claire with her small eyes, framed by absolutely cow's lashes, tastelessly augmented, in a medium-sized salon. And she kept talking as if to a friend, retelling the story of her acquaintance with Jordan. I, myself, am a newcomer. I didn't pass the competition at the institute, so I studied to be a hairdresser. My mother said don't go back to the district. Stay here. Her sister has been living here for a long time, my aunt. She's lonely, so she got attached to me. I clean her floors, help her bathe, give her groceries. She feels good. So my aunt tells me. You, Adriana, you better finish hairdressing courses and earn money like people. Who need your institutes? That's right, I thought I'd go and learn. I grasped it on the fly, and now I'm working in a salon, men's hairdresser. Then again, Aunt Cindy made me do it. You don't know anything, Adriana. You need to get married. And where does a decent man always go? At the barber shop. Adriana looked at Claire apprehensively and bit her tongue. But Claire didn't care about her. Slowly, a bitter, soul-cutting truth began to creep in. She sits in a love nest and listens to the story of her husband's mistress. Could she have ever imagined such a thing? Yes, she couldn't have dreamed it. Simplicity is worse than stealing. Claire exhaled, looking at herself, and suddenly realized why she felt so bad. Until then, she had been sitting there without breathing, tense and tense. What? Perplexed asked Adriana, and without waiting for an answer continued. Well, in general, since the hall is male, there are many men every day, but Jordan, he is not like all of them. She looked at Claire again and finally blushed. Claire saw her neck blush, then pink patterns appeared on her chest. Her whole face turned ugly red too. Claire tried not to look at her. She hated to listen. The revelations to her young rival. Would you please call him from your number? She asked, holding back as best she could. Adriana obediently dialed the number, and after a few seconds, Jordan's familiar voice sounded in the receiver. Yes, Adriana, is something wrong? Claire took the phone from her hands and spoke. You're such a jerk, Claire. Jordan's voice sounded confused. What are you doing in there? How could you? How could you? Claire, come home. I'll explain everything to you. Jordan, of course, could not say anything else at the moment. He was simply dumbfounded. What can you explain to me that while I was taking care of your sick father, you started a new family, lived a life of pleasure? You're a lowlife, a scumbag, a scum. Do you understand? And I don't want to see you ever. She shoved the phone into the hand of a stunned Adriana and walked out of the apartment, slamming the door. She walked away, tears streaming down her eyes. Traitor, scoundrel, traitor. Claire mentally scolded her husband. He has the child, and me. What about me? Claire had always dreamed of having children from the very first days of her marriage, but she had never been able to get pregnant. Many times she would go to the doctor, but each time Jordan would talk her out of it. And then, while caring for a sick old man, thoughts of having a child of her own left Claire. There was no time for that. Still, in her heart, she hoped that she was not the one to blame for the couple's inability to give birth. Going to the doctor had made her so happy, she believed that all was not lost. But now she has and will have nothing, no family, no children, no job. No one needs her, no one at all, not even herself. If she knew why Jordan's passport had turned so brightly pink, something she hadn't and couldn't tell anyone about, perhaps Adriana's story would have dispelled her a little. Claire, by virtue of her good heart, would even feel a little sorry for this distant girl who had seen nothing good in life. Not distant, but Adriana had become wise beyond her years, and with good reason. Adriana never saw her father and never knew him. Her mother only waved away her daughter's inquiries like an annoying fly and drunkenly said, "Fuck him. Remember him." Adriana's mother was drinking. Not only that, it was absolutely indiscriminate on acquaintance, Galena. She had 3 children by different fathers, and laughing, she told one of her sons, "God knows, Ethan, from whom I gave birth to you, I lived with John, and James was next door, so we came by and mended the porch. and she laughed unabashedly. The daughter was still alone, and her mother seemed to love her more than her sons, called her Adriana, her daughter, and even occasionally bought her a new dress. Of course, when there was money from a drunken suitor, and that didn't happen very often. The boys would not be lost, her mother thought. The army and prison would not let them starve to death. The country needed men. On the outskirts of their village, almost in the middle of nowhere, stood only the high fences of the camp, and many kilometers farther away stood the same settlers' settlements where the released prisoners had settled down. Moors in the settlement were most cruel. The licentiousness of the former prisoners bordered on anarchy, and the hard work in the wilderness, where there is nothing to do but lumbering, left no strength for other pleasures than drinking and debauchery. As usual, 15-year-old Adriana was quickly used by one of her mother's friends, taking advantage of her simplicity and the absence of her mother. Then showed her a knife. Not scaring her much, this Adriana was enough to keep quiet. And so they lived until the girl, with sinfulness, graduated from school. The mother's lover went to the girl as soon as the mother got drunk or went somewhere, even for a short time. Then Adriana was already surprised by the miracle. For 3 years she never got pregnant. Her mother's roommate was a relatively young and seemingly handsome man. Perhaps it was still trying on the girl with the position of his secret mistress. Sometimes in a good mood, he praised Adriana for dignity, incomparable with the appearance of the mother, who with every drink became a terrible, sprawled-across old woman. Knowing that her mother had a sister in a distant city, Adriana convinced her mother by crying and constant persuasion that she should go there. Her mother wrote a tearful letter to her sister, and her aunt agreed to take her niece in for the first time. The rest of Adriana's story, Claire, was almost true, except for the legend of the institute. What institute? For the uneducated daughter of an alcoholic? The school in the village gave knowledge that was only enough to live in the village. It is true that exiled intellectuals from the capital's universities used to work at this school and even trained a few medalists, but that was so long ago. And those who received these medals left the terrible land as quickly as their teachers, who had finished their term of exile. In short, Adriana had settled into the city quite well. Not bad at all, if you remember where she came from and who she was. Now she was in a pretty prestigious place, and she was going out of her way to please both the customers and the boss. "Come in, please." She stretched her lips in a welcoming way in front of Jordan, who came in for a haircut. "How shall we cut his hair?" "Well, it's up to you." Jordan smiled back. He was happy to see a new face. "You've studied, but I haven't. And you've probably studied more than I have." Adriana frowned modestly. "Engineer or professor?" Jordan laughed at the girl's unsophisticated compliment and asked, "And you are new. Where Claire?" Claire was the name of his regular hairdresser, of a very respectable weight and no less respectable age. "Yes, I've been hired to replace her on a trial basis, and they said I'd see what happens." Claire's retired. "Enough," she says. "Her legs have sprouted pillars by the chair. I'll dig in the vegetable garden and move to a country house. Except for onion shoots, I will not cut anything in my life. That's enough." Adriana laughed merrily. Jordan gave in to her fun and joined in. From the very first meeting, an extraordinary ease settled between them. Not for nothing, apparently, there is an opinion that love is chemistry. This gravitation of two, the desire to connect, and appeared in an instant, as soon as he saw Jordan Adriana. Without thinking, he wanted to see her again, to be closer to her. Then he realized that Adriana reminded him of the young Claire, the same mischievous eyes and dark curls. But that realization came much later, when he realized what a trap he had fallen into the moment he had decided to meet the young hairdresser after work. Adriana is so innocent and youthful, fresh as Jordan thought. Looking at her dark blonde curls and slender figure, she appeared to be very skillful in lovemaking. How was Jordan to know what and how the released prisoner had taught her 3 whole years in the settlement? Having arrived in the city, Adriana did not lead a monastic life either. Before entering the prestigious salon where she met Jordan, she had traveled the thorny path of an apprentice and was building up her hand, which it must be admitted she excelled at. She started out cutting and shaving men in a station barber shop, and what kind of people did not fall to her? One of the occasional customers, a smashing little guy who also came from the province and settled in the city in the auto shop, captivated her heart and became a constant lover. Chuckling, he told her, "You catch the customer by the beard, do you hear? We'll catch a daddy with you, you and the pleasure of it will get. All I will be easier, and even more money from him to make money. And we with you in the summer on his money, and to the sea. You say too." Adriana sulked. "I love you alone. Do I need some daddy? Love me. Who won't let you, you fool?" Lover laughed happily. "And don't let your daddy out of your hands if you get him." And he strong hand rolls the girl on a joint bed. Recently, the couple began to rent a common room. It's economical and convenient. So about a date with Jordan, allegedly on her living space, Adriana lied without blinking an eye. In fact, having become close in an instant, she and Jordan made love right in Claire's apartment. Moreover, in her own bed, knowing that Claire, she would hardly have been able to have such a quiet conversation with Adriana for such a long time. But a decent person usually sees in another a person like herself, and it could not even occur to Claire how far human baseness could extend. After all, she came to her house only briefly while Christopher slept. Sometimes he was under the care of a nurse who, for a small fee, would visit the sick man to give him an IV of medication for support. The treatment lasted about an hour, and longer with a massage. Claire was on the run making dinner. Jordan cleaned up abandoned things, and not once did the thought of what was going on here without her at night creep up on her. Yes, her husband called her often, at each call asking what she and her father should bring. And also when, at what hour she would be, in their shared apartment, it didn't bother her at all. She didn't even pay attention to her husband's unusual meticulousness. On the contrary, it was pleasant his attention, waiting, counting the hours, "Let's go to my place. I want to treat you to a great coffee." Hiding his eyes, proposed Jordan, Adriana, for the first time, about a week after we met. It was already late evening, and they left the cozy cafe where they had spent several evenings. Kissing and cuddling in the car interior, a grown man and a blossoming woman, did not satisfy. Both wanted to continue. "And your wife?" Adriana was a little surprised. The rest didn't bother her. That was the way she was. "Wife, didn't I tell you?" Jordan was a little confused, although he had warned Adriana about being married right away. He would be honest with this nice girl. Adriana immediately made it clear that it was impossible to meet at her place, because she lived at her aunt's place, although perfectly continued to share a room together with her former lover. She intuitively felt what and when to say, when to smile, and when to open up to meet a man. Having acquired an urban appearance, the girl also learned the ability to behave discreetly. She could not be taught to deceive, she did it brilliantly, but to keep silent where necessary, to create an image of a well-bred, well-mannered maiden. This skill had to be learned as best as possible and preferably faster. Adriana was learning. She watched the men. They showed their feelings even more vividly than women. They turned out to be excellent teachers. Say the wrong thing, and the handsome guy would snap like the last skier. A chiseled guy could get a square swear if he got the wrong haircut. Compliment, affectionate smile, worked wonders. Knave men bought them like children. Barbershop became for Adriana a kind of institute of noble maidens. She could portray any gait, any smile, from a simple and naughty girl to a price-conscious beauty, expanded her art of reincarnation. Of course, these charms applied only to men, and any woman could immediately recognize Adriana in 5 minutes. But men were coming, and for 5-minute seduction, fuse, and talent, Adriana had enough. Fascinated by Adriana's youth and the novelty of his own position, free, in love, Jordan, as if plowing in weightlessness, but had to decide what to do next. And so he decided. "My wife is an invalid," he said, and after a satisfied look at the girl's surprised face, he continued, "I periodically put her in the hospital to heal, but pity her, she is also a person." I could not praise myself. What a good boy! Now he wouldn't have to explain to Adriana why there were women's things in his apartment. At the same time, he made a deposit for future meetings with her. The base is a word. Adriana, not suspecting that decent-looking men, too, can lie, easily accepted his proposal and surprised Jordan, liberation and temperament, their first night together. The next day, the ardent lover could think of nothing else but another night, and Adriana again behaved with complete freedom, and he was easy and simple with her. And Claire, what of Claire? She hadn't bothered him in a long time. Talking only about diapers and medications and a new Bedsores mattress, anyone's feelings would fade, and he's a living man. He's a man, after all, a successful one, by the way. There was not a single decent acquaintance of his who did not have a permanent mistress, and now it was his turn, too. He could afford an expensive beauty, but he liked this cute hairdresser, although it would be better without this job in the service industry, of course. Somehow it is not prestigious. After a couple months of lovemaking, he decided that he didn't have to show Adriana to anyone, but if anything, he wouldn't be ashamed to pass with her. Acquaintances will only smack, looking at the lush forms of his girlfriend. But to confess that your mistress works in a beauty salon, haircuts, and shaves other men, it is somehow not comical. "Adriana, you should quit that job," he said, resting after the raucous entertainment. Adriana lifted her dark head from his shoulder and looked into his eyes. "When are we to be married?" Jordan, strangely enough, was not ready for marriage with a live wife, so he took the conversation aside. "Adriana, soon I'll rent you an apartment, so we'll be there. We'll see each other more easily and freely. And my wife, she's not a bad person, she suffers. Poor thing. I try to create all conditions for her, of course, but the disease, it progresses. I'd be an asshole if I left her now. You'd be the first to judge me, darling." And he rushed to kiss Adriana, showering her with compliments, and Adriana laughed again, forgetting her purpose. Adriana could wait a long time, but here she was not forced to do anything. After seeing Jordan off, she pulled the curtain on the window, a sign to her roommate that the entrance to her apartment was available. He had moved out immediately from the old small apartment to this one, rented for Adriana by Jordan, and the presence of men's things. Adriana easily explained to Jordan that her brother, a student, often visited her on weekends. She couldn't deny him a vacation and a full meal at her sister's house, could she? Jordan's free weekends suited him just fine, and he easily took on his brother's version of the story. His father and Claire were eagerly awaiting him on Saturday and Sunday, too. While Jordan was with his father, Claire would get at least a few hours of freedom to clean up, socialize with her friends, at least go to the sauna after all. It turned out that everything worked out marvelously well for everyone. Everything settled down. Adriana finally quit her job. Jordan gave her enough money to support her young lover, but he still decided to keep his job. 2 years into her relationship with Jordan, Adriana suddenly found herself pregnant. She thought that her body was now rested after the stress. She didn't have to live in constant tension, so she was able to conceive. Wow, a kinder was made. Her roommate laughed, neither surprised nor pleased. But you, Adriana, don't count on me. I'm a shitty father. I have such a kinder, probably all over the country is full of running. So come on, make your daddy happy. He needs an hair. I was just on my way to a construction site. A friend of mine wants me to go. The man, very far from thinking about the family nest, quickly packed his things and drove off in an unknown direction. Most likely not that far away, just to avoid Adriana's eyes. The confused Adriana cried for a long time, abandoned by her constant lover, with whom she had long since gotten over. Jordan arrived, saw her swollen face, and rushed to embrace her. Adriana, what are you doing? Who's hurt you? No one. Adriana sobbed. I'm pregnant. Oh, what a trouble you're in. Jordan laughed. It's wonderful. You'll give birth to a beauty like you. Until now, Jordan had never suspected that the news that he would soon become a father would make him happy. For so many years, he had avoided persistent conversations with Claire about the future birth of a child. Why he had avoided parenthood, Jordan himself could not answer. Not ready, that would be the truth. And here he himself did not understand why, out of a desire to appease his mistress, the acceptance of this unknown infant was suddenly born. With every visit to Adriana, this acceptance grew stronger, and now he himself did not understand why he so desperately refused future fatherhood, living with Claire. Incidentally, it must be said that he continued to have a wonderful relationship with Claire. He showed touching care for his wife, but there had been no intimacy between them for a long time. Claire, a proud and self-sufficient woman, did not touch the subject out of delicacy. There was no need for tenderness. Christopher was dying. He was already 40 days old. Claire had long lived at home, and the couple continued to live as brother and sister. Returning from the gynecologist, Claire was just about to gather the mental strength to decide to have the most important conversation with her husband for the future of their family. It began to rain, but she, as if without noticing it, took among some half-abandoned cottages, not thinking at all about where she was going. The phone in her bag rang insistently, but she paid no attention to it. Only feeling deadly tired, the woman looked around, saw an old bench under a tree, sat down, leaned her head against the rough table, and closed her eyes. At that time, a white-haired little boy was running along the sidewalk, slapping on the puddles, enjoying the splashes that flew from under his bare feet. He tried to run exactly in the middle of the small puddles that had managed to form from the rain, and now they glistened under the light of the lantern. He squealed and laughed joyfully when the splashing water hit his face and carelessly licked the muddy drops off his lips. It was Adam, a 3-year-old little boy who had run away from his loving grandmother, and his great joy from an independent walk. There was no limit. "Adam, I'm in trouble with you," shouted the old lady, trying to catch up with her grandson and not keeping up with him. "Where are you going on the puddles? Stop. I say, you'll catch cold, and you'll have to take care of yourself. Oh, you are my bitter little sorrow." Finally, she managed to pick up the baby, but she immediately let him go, shrieking from the pain that shot through her lower back. She turned to look around for a bench and only then saw a woman sitting on a bench under a tree. The old woman shuddered fearfully. "Lord, your power, what is it?" The little boy in his grandmother's arms also quieted down when he saw the stranger, and with some fear looked at the pale face of the sitting woman. "Is she alive?" the old woman muttered, slowly approaching the bench. Then she stepped toward Claire and touched her with her hand. "Whose are you going to be, girl? Why are you sitting out here in the rain? What's the matter with you?" Claire opened her eyes. "Don't worry, I'll be right out. I just got lost here by accident. Where would you go in this darkness?" The old woman looked around worriedly. "Well, let's go to my place. It's my house over there." Lifting Claire by the elbow, she continued to speak softly. "I live with my grandson. Is my name Margaret? And this is Adam." The frightened boy looked out from behind Margaret's back. Claire followed the friendly old woman. She had no strength, and she would certainly not have made it home on her own. The place was remote. The phone was dead. There were no cars or cabs around. It was a completely unfamiliar suburb where she had never been in her life. Soon enough they came to an old 2-story house, probably from the time of the first builders. They went up to the second floor and entered a small apartment. Margaret put the kettle on and took her grandson into the bathroom. "I'll only be 5 minutes, darling," she said to Claire. "Otherwise, God forbid he gets sick, I'll warm the child." She quickly bathed Adam in a hot bath and brought him to the kitchen. "Now for some hot tea." After Adam, she also went to the bath and cleaned herself up. The hot shower made her feel better, and she was able to answer Margaret's questions. "I, Margaret, learned a terrible thing today," she began quietly. "I have no husband, no child, no family." "Oh, no," the new acquaintance groaned. "Are they dead?" "No, my husband is alive, even happy. He abandoned me, Margaret, and abandoned me a long time ago, and I was a fool. I lived quietly and trusted the scoundrel." Wanting to talk, the woman told about herself, not hiding any details from the old woman. "Why did he do that?" "I did everything for him, loved, cared, and what happened? I took care of his father for 10 years, and during that time he betrayed me, cheated on me." "How can you do that? And the most frustrating thing is that I'm 32 years old and I don't have children. I do not even imagine whether I can even think about men. I dream about a child. 10 years I lived next to my dying father-in-law, and I thought only about a baby. While I look for a new husband, my time will be up." Claire grinned bitterly and sipped the cooled tea. Renewing the brew, the women began the tea party anew. The hostess remembered the forgotten cutlets and warmed them for her new friend. "You probably haven't eaten anything since this morning. Here, eat this, you'll feel better." Everything seems bad to a hungry person, but on a full stomach it's no trouble at all. Claire only now remembered that in the morning before going to the doctor, she had not eaten anything, thinking that she would have to take tests. Poppy seed in her mouth since last night. She feels completely drained. At first through force, living through a juicy morsel, she gradually got into the flavor. The meat was fragrant with garlic and onions, and with hot tea, Claire ate 3 cutlets and turned a little pink. Margaret began to comfort Claire, and Adam and I, too, were left alone. There are not only men who are unfaithful, there are also enough butterflies among women that fly from flower to flower. They're all looking for the best and the sweetest. Did Adam's mom leave him? Claire guessed. She's beautiful. Why would she bother with a child? She'd rather spread her beauty around the world, live for herself. And that's how deceptive appearances can be, Claire. Was she really beautiful? She took an interest in this family. The son came. "Mom, I'm getting married. Here's the bride." Well, I look at her. She looks like a daughter-in-law, a nice girl, lovely to look at. She's tall, straight, looks into the eyes, looks cheerful, and has curls. Now this miracle is made with her own hands, so she knows how to do something, also good. I guess you can't drink water off a face, of course, but my Harry is worth every beauty. It's not good for a mother to praise her child, but my son, he looks like a hero from a picture. He took after my father, and our father was a man to all men. It's all right that he's found a match. God willing, they'll get along happily. Get married. I say the young years are passing. Why grow old alone? Let's have a family. Together you'll look for what you want and build it. I blessed my son. We summoned the guests, celebrated honorably, everything as it should be. Right after the wedding, my daughter-in-law got pregnant and gave birth to Adam. And now, not like before, the little one needs diapers and food, not like nowadays. He doesn't suck a tit, and his food is very expensive, they say, so he started to run out of money. Margaret told how the money shortage started, how she tried to save money and diversify at least the food of the young. She got Piglet, worked from morning till evening on a small vegetable garden, made rolls so that the harvest would not go to waste. But of course it was not enough. And the young wife sat at home more, not helping with the household in any way. She always had an excuse. She had a stomachache. Adam did not let her sleep at night. Adam was capricious. Margaret put up with it too, as long as the child was looked after. But Harry would not spoil her mood because her son tries, works, takes overtime when he can. So we stretched as hard as we could, but we got tired. That's what I'm telling you, Claire. Harry came home from work one day and said he was leaving the workshops. Turns out a friend of his from the army had written him a letter. He didn't write often, but this was just in time. He's been on a business trip for a long time, and he calls Harry to him. He writes to us that we need such people very much. You're not a drinker, handy and ahead, all sorts of tasks, like nuts. He wants Harry to work with him because his partner moved to the south and gave up business trips. He needs to be treated in the sea air, so my Harry has decided he's going to work on a rotational basis. What about your sister-in-law? Did she agree? Claire asked. How could she not? She loved money, that she will buy on joy. Everything. She liked to dress up a lot, but my grandson was dressed up like a Tsarevich. I kept scolding them. Don't spoil the boy like that. He doesn't understand anything yet, and they put new expensive clothes on him every day. They wash them, so he doesn't have time to put them on a second time, as everything is already too small. He grows by leaps and bounds, but life has gotten better, hasn't it? Claire either asked or confirmed. Oh, Claire, on the outside, everything is peaceful. Money seems to have improved, but what's inside a man, you can't see at once. The wife turned out to be a troublemaker. She strayed when Adam was not even a year old. I didn't say a word when I noticed the affair. Harry came to visit. We had a goodbye, he went away, but she's so fussy about it. She's been trying all sorts of ways to get out of the house to deceive me. And she attacked the wrong one. I waited for her until she came back late, smelling of wine. Her cheeks flushed, her eyes wandering. Come on, sister-in-law, I told her sit down next to me and let's talk. Where have you been? Who were you out with? Don't lie to me. I've seen your sister. I'm a woman myself. I know at a glance who breeds what. Well, Claire got excited. So she sat down, her eyes down to the floor, playing the innocent, but she kept silent, and I kept silent. We were sitting like that, and suddenly she started crying. "Excuse me, she's crying Mommy. She called me Mom. She lost her mother long ago." "And you?" Interest, Claire in the lives of complete strangers, was growing. "What about me? My business is old," I told her so. "It's not me I'm telling you to live with, sweetheart. You have a husband. And if you think about it, you have a son too. Will you sit like that in front of them? How will you look into their eyes?" She cried, and they went to bed. And I didn't sleep all night. I had no peace. And in the morning I fell asleep, so soundly that I didn't hear anything. Only when Adam woke up and began to grunt, I jumped up to him. I looked, and my sister-in-law's bed was empty, and the bed was tidied up neatly as before the guests. I looked in the closet, and there was not a single dress. All I immediately realized, she ran away with her boyfriend, unknown to what distant lands, and she did not take any money. Unless she had a separate amount with her, but I know nothing about that, but I do not have time to sit and cry. So I dressed up my grandson and fed him, took him for a walk and sang songs. That's all. Did you even write or call afterwards? Her only listener was worried. No, Claire, I waited. I think she is a mother, such a wonderful boy, how not to love and miss him. But no, not once, not a single word. So she hasn't been around since. She has, of course she has. You can't go far without money, and that man doesn't need her without money. My sister-in-law came back 2 weeks later. Harry hadn't even gotten back from his business trip yet. Adam and I are walking from the store with a heavy grocery bag in one hand and my grandson in the other, and near the entrance, Mother of God. My daughter-in-law is sitting there. Adam shouted, "Mom, Mom," but she and cry and hug my son. She almost falls on her knees in front of me again. There are a lot of unkind eyes around. Everyone is curious about what's going on in the neighborhood. But I picked up the bride and took her home. What to be ashamed in front of people? And she, poor thing, continues to wail about her misfortune. "What shall I do, Mother?" she says. "How can I go on? She won't forgive me, Harry, and neither will you." And Adam, he cuddled up to his mother, hugging her, saying his own things to her. And I felt sorry for the poor head. He grew up without a mother. Who would teach him life? A mother to a child, whatever she is. Don't make another orphan out of Adam. Let them raise their own child, if they've given birth. How could she? Claire was indignant. To abandon such a lovely boy. And that's my sweetheart. She must have been a breed. She'd live like a human being, and then she'd do something nasty. So we agreed that we wouldn't say anything to Harry, and we'd start our lives all over again, as if she'd never done anything wrong. It's not uncommon for young people to have disagreements and quarrels between husband and wife, but as they embrace and sleep in the same bed for a night, all the past will be forgotten and there will be peace and tranquility in the house again. Didn't it work out that way for them? Claire asked. I don't know. Harry was making good money. I tried to help everyone. Kelly, that's my daughter-in-law, tried not to spend too much money, so they decided to separate. At least a little, but to have their own place. They moved from me to a one-room apartment, and to pay for it took, as it is called now, a big loan for housing exactly. A mortgage? That's what Claire said. That's the one. Margaret rejoiced, a forgotten word. They live on their own. And what about me? My eyes can't see, my ears can't hear what's going on between them. Whether we lovebirds live amicably, but only in peace, I have not known since then. I wondered if Kelly would bear it, if she'd keep her temper, or if she'd go back to her old ways. She didn't hold back, so she went out again. Claire said yes to Paula. She has. Maybe she inherited it from her parents. But she had a nature that couldn't be overcome. Was my son worth it, to change him for swindlers? He doesn't drink. He can't stand it. Well, he smokes. It's a hard job. He's used to it. He's never tried tobacco before. He's not a bad character. He doesn't pick on little things. He does everything for the house, everything with a smile. Kelly sleeps in the morning and won't go to the baby. I boil sometimes. It's not a good thing for a grown woman to lie in bed until noon, until the sun starts to blaze up her ass, but Harry just smiles. Let her sleep, Mama. She never slept so sweet as she did at your place. How did she do it in her apartment? Claire wondered. I suppose she did. I've only been there a couple of times, and then I've come with my own hotels. She said, "Oh, Mama, how delicious! What pies you bake!" She praises them, but she puts store-bought sausage and cheese on the table. I found out later that she started treating Harry badly, too. She'd disappear for a night or two, and he wouldn't say a word, wouldn't bother me. That's when I wished I'd warned him. Watch your wife. She's not averse to running off to the left. And then Kelly, our dear Kelly, she started drinking. One day she went to the store and did not return, but now she left with money, all that was at home, earned by her husband, took with her. She will come back, come to her senses and come back. How can she leave her son? Margaret comforted Claire. No, honey, she's not coming back. She's dead. She had an accident. Claire, who had not expected such an outcome, covered her mouth with her hand in fright. Margaret continued her sad story. She was traveling with a man, and they died together, whether it was her half-lover or another unknown. I don't know the details. Harry told me all about it. She sold their apartment together, too, as it turned out. How could she do that? It's a complicated process. Everyone who lives in the apartment has to participate in it. Claire was once again surprised. And they also have a minor child. His share is not allowed to be sold in any case. The guardianship authorities monitor it, because he is defenseless, Adam, and should not remain without registration and without housing. Claire was aware of a lot of the legal laws by nature of her job, so she sold it to some crooks. There's all these black whatchamacallits nowadays. Black realtors? That's what Claire said. Yeah, that's what her half-lover set her up with, and got Kelly to do the paperwork. They got a law against the law. They'll get around anything. They say they even kill people for housing if they get a lonely person who nobody asks if they're alive. And then what? Claire was already looking forward to the denouement. Then she ran away, collected all the coins and ran. The money's been squandered. So Harry came to me with Adam, asked me to look after him. He said I had a contract to finish my work. I let him go. I'm looking after my grandson myself, but it's getting harder and harder every day. While the women were talking in the kitchen, Adam fell asleep. Claire helped her carry the boy to his crib, and then she and Margaret cleared the table. She washed the dishes, and as she fell asleep, she was surprised to think that she hadn't thought of her husband at all for hours. In the morning after breakfast, she thanked the old woman for everything. Margaret, you saved me. I had no one to turn to talk to, and here you are. God brought me to you. Come on, my dear, the old woman said. If it wasn't for me, who else would have found someone else? A man in the world will not be lost. You just don't sit alone. Close yourself. Come out of your resentment. She kissed Adam on his fair head and hugged his grandmother and went home. Promised to come back soon. She really did want to get back to those two as soon as possible, to help as much as she could with them. She didn't want to go home, but there was nowhere to go. She had to solve an unexpected and despicable situation, which was created by the husband she loved before. The husband turned out not to be full of peers at all, as it would have been good if he had spared the woman from finding out about the relationship. Remembering that the best defense is offense, Jordan from the first minute took the form of insulted virtue. He met his wife with indignant words. "Where have you been, Claire?" Saying God knows what to me on the phone, throwing me off my rhythm. "You're sleeping at God knows whose house." Oh, Claire grinned, no longer surprised by Jordan's insolence. "You're out of rhythm, aren't you? And I thought you had already learned to sit on 2 chairs to maneuver between 2 families? Well, I haven't succeeded yet." She saw that Jordan had lost a little of the high ground from which he had intended to speak to her. He shrank back and lowered his head. "Claire," he spoke in a different way, "you have to understand, there's a child in there." "I didn't think anything of it. I wasn't going to have an affair on the side, but I couldn't take it." Claire looked at him straight on. "You couldn't stand the lonely idleness while I was courting your father, could you? You wanted a young body, a free relationship. Well, good for you. You're doing great. It's not like that. You're overplaying your hand. I resented you. I'm a man. I need to feel supported and cared for. And I'm a woman, so I don't need anything at all, do I?" Claire was beginning to boil. "You haven't spent a single night with my father. Not once have you offered to help me with the nurse. And I'm a young woman, too. Men still look at me, by the way, even though I've dried up and aged over the years." Jordan had nothing to say, and she was getting more and more atomized. "Do you realize what it means to spend years after a sick old man? How many times I got up to my father every night. How hard it was for me to lift him, to wash him. How I withered without society, without girlfriends. I have none left." Claire cried. They both could not remember how they had been as young people, loving each other and full of life plans. Jordan felt a grudging estrangement from his wife, forgetting everything she had sacrificed so that he could pursue his career in peace. Claire was thrown into shock by Jordan's betrayal. She simply couldn't imagine how he could have gotten to such a point of hypocrisy, though she could now recall many episodes she hadn't paid attention to. Some suspicious or inappropriate words of his, letting them pass her ears. "You're selfish." Blamed her own self after all, Jordan. "You've always been preoccupied only with yourself, with your own needs. Your long lists, your demands, the grocery lists I fed your father, demanding a nurse or a doctor to visit Christopher at home." Claire was no longer able to be indignant. She looked at her husband's flushed, aroused face and couldn't understand how her beloved Jordan could hide in the body, this fat, lustful male, thinking only of himself. What had to happen for a man to change so much? After all, Jordan's mother and father were deeply decent people. A lot of things made sense now. They had lived apart for a long time. Except for Christopher, they had nothing left to bind them together. You wouldn't think of a shared living space as a bond, but as the fruit of a marriage. Yes, and this apartment, for 10 years, became not cozy, abandoned, although they tried to bring it to a more decent form. With the salary that Jordan received, they could have long ago bought a more spacious home to equip it according to the latest fashion, hire a designer and excellent craftsman, but she had no strength, and he had no desire to somehow strengthen the household, and thus the family. And now she is alone at a broken trough. This does not scare her at all. The protective power of the body does not give Claire despair and think about the future. She needs to urgently cut this knot of feelings that has been tormenting her for more than 24 hours, because it is unbearable. Enough. Powerfully, she interrupted Jordan, who was already carrying something completely obscene, purposely atomizing himself. She only heard the words about her infertility, but she didn't care anymore. "Pack your things and leave. You have your own apartment now. You have a wife and a son. Go. I can't promise to die, but you'll finally be Adriana forever. I'll file for divorce tomorrow." "I will," answered the confused Jordan. He did not expect such a quick resolution of the case. Taking the big bag, he slammed the door. Claire only grinned again, noting, "Prepared, packed the bag in advance." 2 months passed, and Claire became a frequent visitor to Margaret and Adam. She did all the housework, looked after the boy and his grandmother, and became very attached to them. She didn't want to stay in her own apartment. First of all, she had gotten used to it over the years. Secondly, she felt stuffy there. Memories came into her head, plunging her again and again into a maelstrom of bad moods and depression. She would only leave for her place in the evening, but in the morning she would deal with the divorce proceedings, grab a bite to eat somewhere on the beach, and wander around the city until she was exhausted. The weather for Claire was now good for anything. She treasured every hour of freedom and the opportunity to enjoy nature and the cityscape. One evening, when Claire was about to go to bed, the phone rang. It was Margaret. The old woman's voice sounded muffled and painful. "Claire, I'm not feeling well. I've called an ambulance. Come to Adam, for God's sake. He'll be alone if they take me away." Claire called a cab and rushed to the boy, taking some of the groceries she had at home. Half an hour later, she was already there. She saw an ambulance at a familiar entrance. Worried, she ran up to the second floor. The doctor had just examined the patient and was washing his hands. "Doctor, what's wrong with her?" Claire asked. "You see, it needs a full examination." The doctor answered evasively. "Her condition is moderately serious. She needs rest. We will take her to the hospital, and the main treatment will be prescribed after the final diagnosis." From that day on, Claire's worries increased. Now she visited the old woman in the hospital, brought her home-cooked food, and comforted her, promising that everything would be all right. Adam never let go of Claire's hand, and Margaret thanked God that she had someone to leave her beloved grandson to. One evening, Claire was putting Adam to bed. She read him a book, laid him on his side, covered him with a blanket, and began to hum a little song. Suddenly he looked over her head and jumped out of bed screaming, "Daddy, Daddy!" Claire turned and stood in the doorway with a surprised face. A tall, handsome man froze and looked at her without understanding anything. Then he picked up his son in his arms, kissed him, and asked, "Adam, who is this?" The boy took his father's face in his palms, looked into his eyes, and with complete seriousness whispered, "This is my mother, only it's a secret." The little boy didn't want to let go of his father. "Adam, but Daddy drove a long time, then flew on an airplane. He is very tired and hungry." Claire explained, "All right, feed him." Reluctantly, he let go of his father's hand. "Dad, will you come to sleep at my place?" "Of course, son," the father promised fervently. As always, that's why he was coming. Claire put the boy to bed again and closed the door and went into the kitchen. Quickly warming up the food, she set the table and sat down across from Harry. "I'll feed you for real in the morning, but for now there's nothing else to eat. I'm sure it's a nice dinner after a working canteen." Harry smiled and began to chow down on the soup. Over tea, Claire couldn't help herself. "I know a lot about you, Harry. Your mother told me." The man looked seriously into her eyes. "Well, that's good. I hope to get to know you better, too." 2 years had passed since Harry had discovered Claire in his house. They were married and quite happy. A few months ago, They had moved into the house Harry had bought, a large, spacious house with plenty of room for everyone. Margaret couldn't get enough of her daughter-in-law and kept telling her son that she had found him such a good wife. Adam had long ago called Claire Mama, and she was genuinely happy about it, gifting the boy with unspent maternal love. She was picking out an ice cream cone near the summer kiosk when a man's voice called out to her. Turning around, she saw Jordan. She recognized her ex-husband immediately, but was struck by the change in his appearance. Jordan had grown old and flabby. His stomach hung over the strap of his pants, and he looked untidy and unkempt. "Hello, Claire." Jordan came very close to her and wanted to reach out his hand or hug her, but when he ran into his ex-wife's gaze, he got embarrassed and lowered his hands. "Hello." Claire answered not so much coldly as indifferently. She was deeply indifferent to this strange man, and the meeting did not please her at all. "How are you?" Jordan asked, looking the woman over from head to toe. It was the same old Claire, young, slender, and beautiful. Only better then? Probably over the years, she had gained self-confidence, the kind of confidence that only loving and beloved women have. Jordan did not know how to analyze, but he felt this confidence at once, and with a cold heart, he reached out to his ex-wife. "Good, and you, I see, not too much?" Claire inquired, unable to hide her dislike. "Yes, I'm divorced." Jordan waved his hands in different directions, as if confessing his helplessness. Though Claire didn't ask him any questions, he began to tell her in a hurry. "Adriana, she lied to me. It turned out she didn't have a child with me. I spent 5 years raising someone else's boy. Do you understand, Claire?" He looked at Claire again, as if complaining of injustice and asking for protection. "Well, what can we do? It's not the child's fault," Claire said, and then she made up with her ex and went to him. Just left a note on the table. Some people don't leave notes. Claire grinned bitterly, remembering her past experiences. However, now everything was almost forgotten, and she didn't want to remember, not to have anything to do with her ex-husband, not even to stand next to him. It was unpleasant for her. She looked away impatiently, waiting for Jordan to make way for her. "Claire, I'm so sorry to you. You know, I miss you so much. Why don't we try to start over? You love me, and I love you." "You're too late, Jordan. With your love, I don't need it now." Claire turned away to make herself comfortable, to grab the ice cream bag and walk away, but he grabbed her arm. "Claire, I'm alone, all alone. I won't make the same mistake I made last time, and you're alone too, so why don't we get together? You're childless. Who needs you but me?" "No, I'm not childless." Claire grinned contemptuously. "But that's none of your business." With her head held high, she strode past Jordan while he continued to stare after her. The man saw a tall, handsome man approach the woman. He held the hand of a blonde-haired boy, about 5 years old, and on his neck sat a little girl with dark curls on her head, diligently eating cotton candy. The happy family went on their way. Jordan stood and looked after them for a long time, thinking that he himself had given his happiness to this stranger.